MPT, did you catch my last? Just toss it to me.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
I'll open and toss it to you.
All right.
15. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are now live.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Mayor Pro Tem Edward Wood, and I'd like to call the meeting of October 21st, University Place City Council to order. And I am on Zoom tonight because I'm picking up a cold and my throat is killing me. So I would like to give this to the city attorney to determine who can chair the meeting tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. Under your council rules, section 3A of your council rules, in the absence of both the mayor and the mayor pro tem, the council shall appoint one of the members of the council to act as a presiding temporary officer, noting that there are 6 individuals of council present. That does require a majority vote of the 6. So 4 to proceed. And the temporary presiding officer would then be the individual to call the council meeting to order. So at this point in time, I think it's probably appropriate, if there are any nominations from any members of the body, to identify a temporary presiding officer for this evening's purposes.
I'll nominate Councilmember Worthington.
Second.
And then with a motion by Councilmember McCluskey, seconded by Councilmember Fleming, is there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, I believe, Councilmember Worthington, you'll be the temporary presiding officer for tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Case. Appreciate that. Appreciate the council selection this evening. And Mayor Pro Tem, I'll return this to you at the end of the evening, happily. With that, let's see. We can proceed with our meeting, and we'll. Excuse me. I believe the Mayor Pro Tem already called us to order, correct?
He did.
Yeah. Okay. And then we can move on to the roll call with the city clerk's help.
Councilmember Boykin.
Present.
Councilmember Worthington.
Present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
I'm here.
Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Councilmember Grassi.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wood.
Present.
Mayor Figueroa is excused. Councilmember Worthington, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And we'll proceed with our Pledge of Allegiance with Councilmember Fleming's help. Can you lead us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please join us in the pledge to our nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With that, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda, and I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I would like to do the motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
I think it's just approving the agenda,
Oh, we're at the agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
but I will second your motion.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm one step ahead of where I'm supposed to be at.
Very good. So we have a motion to approve the agenda, and did I hear a second?
Was seconded.
Second. All right. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda as distributed? Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Move on now to public comments, and it's at this time we take public comments from the audience here in the room, here in the council chambers, and then also public comment is available online following. There'll be instructions in just a moment on the screen as to how people can submit a request for public comment on the screen, and in the interim, we'll ask the city clerk to tell us about public comments here. Mm-hmm.
Mayor, we don't have anyone online to do public comment, and we didn't have anyone sign up here.
Do we have anyone in the room that would like to make a public comment this evening? Anyone in the room? I'm not seeing any. Not offhand, and no one online still. Then public comments are over for this evening, and we can move on then to our next order of business. I think that takes us to the eager consent agenda.
That's right. Now we get to do it.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda as proposed? Any objections to the consent agenda? I see none. The consent agenda is approved as proposed and distributed. That brings us to a public hearing this evening. And let's see. So we will be hearing a staff report. After the staff report, we'll convene a public hearing to see if there's any public comments on that. We will then, council will move into a discussion of the item. And, excuse me, this is not scheduled for action tonight. So we will consider the public comments and have a future discussion, I think, at the next meeting, where there will be another public hearing opportunity, I believe, as well. So, Leslie, please, I'd like to introduce things.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. This is the first of 3 public hearings scheduled to give residents an opportunity to provide comments on the 25-26 proposed biennial budget. On Monday, October 4th, we held the first study session and reviewed revenues. The 25-26 budget is balanced and fits the conservative financial assumptions for city budgets. It is an operations budget at core service levels, CIP at core service levels using local dollars to leverage grants. It includes the early payoff of the 2016 bond debt. Remaining debt payments are budgeted according to their debt schedule. And there are 3 new FTEs included in the budget in 2025. The document was submitted to the city clerk on September 30th in accordance with RCW 35A.34. And the full document is posted on the city website on the Finance Department page for anyone that would like to download it and review it. There will be 2 additional public hearings, one on November 4th and the third on November 18th, to allow residents to provide comments. Tax revenues are expected to increase from 2024 year-end estimates, and in preparing the budget, we continue to be conservative with revenue projections for the biennium. The proposed budget includes the statutorily allowed increase in the city's ad valorem property tax in each year of the biennial budget. The property tax is scheduled for study session on November 4th and council consideration on November 18th. The 2025-26 budget is a status quo budget within moderate levels of inflation assumed for expenditures. We will have our second study session later this evening to review expenditure budgets, community grants, and new item requests. As always, we'll continue providing the best service we can, meeting all our contractual, legal, and debt obligations while exercising prudent cash management and maintaining our strategic reserve.
Very good. Thank you. And at this time, I would invite any members of the public to come forward and make comments about, excuse me, I'm sorry, not yet. I'm ahead of myself by about 2 meetings, I think. We are taking public comment now. It's action we're not taking. I'm sorry. So I would continue to invite the members of the public to come forward and make comment about the biennial budget for 2025-26. Is there anyone here that would like to make comment about the budget? Just raise your hand and come forward. Anyone? How about online? Do we have anyone online that would like to make comment about the...
No one online, Mayor.
Okay, all right.
Councilmember.
And then just a final last call. Anyone at all? Not seeing anyone. We're going to close the public hearing. All right. Thank you. And that moves us on to the school liaison officer agreement, I believe. Great. So we have helping us Jennifer Hales, our public safety administrator, along with Chief Burke. Thank you both for being here. And if you could tell us a bit about, and the public a bit about the school resource office, school liaison officer agreement.
Good evening, members of the council. I am Jennifer Hales, your Public Safety Director, and this is your Chief of Police, Pat Burke. We're here tonight for a public hearing and council consideration of the proposed resolution that authorizes the city manager to adopt an agreement with the University Place School District for a shared school liaison officer. The council reviewed this agreement during the study session held on October 7th. This agreement will use an existing FTE to reestablish a law enforcement presence in the schools through the 2026 school year, enhance school safety while also addressing operational gaps in the city's day-to-day police operations, strengthen relationships in the schools with staff, kids, parents, and reimburse the city for a little over half the contract cost of a school liaison officer. Staff are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Hales. Appreciate that. Council, do we have any factual questions, anything about the agreement that you wanted to get some further information before we take public comment? And this would just be factual issues.
Shall I? Okay. I'd like to adopt a resolution approving the 2024-2026 agreement between the City of University Place and University Place School District for a school liaison officer.
All right, we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, again, any questions from council about the agreement before we move to the public? And I'm looking online to see if there are council members online. I don't see any questions there. And I see none at the dais. We can move on to public comment. So are there any members of the public in the room that would like to make comment about the school liaison officer agreement with the City of University Place and the University Place School District? Anyone in the room that would like to make a comment? You can come forward and raise your hand, and we'd be happy to hear up to 3 minutes of your comments. We also, likewise online, we have the instructions for folks to make known their interest making a comment online, and so far I'm not seeing anyone there. Emmy?
No one online, council member.
All right. Don't see anyone in the room. Last and final call for public comment on this. Not seeing any. We'll move on to the discussion. So, council, so if we have any comments ourselves, this is the opportune time for that. And I'm going to try, because of the online presence, I'm going to try and I'll call out to individuals going through our round-robin process here. And I think, Councilmember Boykin, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
Thank you very much. I do want to just reiterate, I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to not just demonstrate that we care very deeply about our children, but specifically this audience and how we are intentional about creating additional relationships and ensuring that law enforcement in particular has a way to just continuously lift immediately in the high schools, but also how it affects overall community engagement and how we demonstrate that we're better together. And so I just really think it's a wonderful idea, wonderful opportunity, and just didn't want that to be minimized. I think it's just really important that we recognize what University Place is doing and how we're using those resources very specifically and intentionally to get those types of outcomes.
Thank you, Councilmember Boykin. Appreciate it. So, Councilmember McCluskey, would you like to make any comments?
I would. Thank you, Council Member. I am really excited that we're going to get a school liaison officer back on our school property. The schools are a significant employer in the City of University Place, and they house all of our kids, right? Especially around the high school and junior high. They all congregate to that one little corner of our community. And for us to have a police presence there, it will demonstrate to the kids that go to school that they probably will feel more safe. You'll be able to handle the first calls right away in a very compassionate, caring, and collaborative way. So they will be able to see that the police officers are not a threat, even though they come at some, uncomfortable times. But at least when they're there, they'll feel a little more engaged, and it will help the police do a better job all around for the betterment of our community. So for all those reasons and others I can think of on the top of my head, I'm really excited that we have this position back.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Councilmember Grassi, would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you. Yes, it's win, win, win. I think this is a win for our families, our parents, school district, our team. Thank you for your hard work on making this happen. I'm excited about the candidate that's coming. We're going to have just the right person, I know. I echo my colleagues' sentiments in regards to things that have already been said, but I'm a firm believer that you have to be on site to gain insight, and I'm excited about this officer gaining insight into our kids, our youth, our families, being really a subject matter expert for our families and our most vulnerable, our youth, and this is an investment into our future and our families. So well done. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. Thank you. And Councilmember Fleming?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too just want to echo the comments that have been previously mentioned by other council members. But the other thing I wanted to add is for those who are here in the chamber and those who are watching at home, it may not seem like the council has a lot of questions about this proposal, but for those who were in attendance to the last council meeting, we had a lot of questions, and we got them all answered, and it was the proposal before us is I guess, reflection of that engagement that we had at that time, and it really does bring to culmination a lot of work behind the scenes. It's important for the community to know that our law enforcement, despite what they hear in the media, that our law enforcement officers here are a true partner of our community. And they own it in the sense that they're here to protect all of us, and they show that every single day they're out on the streets taking care of our citizens. You know, to the kids and the parents of kids that are in school, I know it is somewhat of a concerning time when you read about in the newspapers or hear on the news about what's happening throughout the country in our schools, even down to the elementary schools. But it's nice to know that with the engagement of our law enforcement, our kids are safe, and our teachers are safe, and the faculty and the staff are safe in our schools. So I'm excited, like the others, to get this piece of legislation passed and get our law enforcement presence back in our schools so we can get on with ensuring the safety, security, and well-being of our kids. So thank you, and thanks, Jennifer and Chief, and I know all the other folks that worked with you on getting this piece of legislation put together.
Thank you as well. All right. And then Mayor Pro Tem Wood, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I do. I'll keep them brief. First, I think this is a great opportunity for our schools and our community, and I think we should be definitely taking advantage of this. And I also appreciate from a budgetary perspective how this extends the life of our public safety fund a little bit longer. So, yes, I think this is a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And just briefly in terms of my comments, I certainly echo the interest and in bringing law enforcement back a presence back into the schools, and that's a benefit, I think, for all. For a variety of reasons, and I think my colleagues have articulated that very well. I think in this case I would add also I feel like this agreement is very fair to all parties, and I've had a chance to look through that and had a few questions. They were well answered, and I'm happy to support the agreement. Look forward to the vote in just a moment or two. Does anyone else have any following statements before we go to that vote, as a matter of fact? So, apparently not. And so, will a voice vote work for you online? All right, very good. Then we'll do a roll call with your help, Emmy. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Boykin?
Yes.
Councilmember Worthington?
Yes.
Councilmember McCluskey?
Yes.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Grassi?
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Wood?
Aye.
Councilmember, vote results 6-0, unanimous.
Thank you. The agreement passes. And with that, and thank you all for the Chief Burke, Jennifer, thank you for your good help and putting the agreement together and getting this done. It's a good step forward for all of us. And then that brings us to the city manager report, and I invite Manager Sugg to tell us whatever you think will be of interest.
Thank you, Chair Worthington and council members. I have a couple brief items. You may have noticed Friday that we had a significant tenant move into the village here, and I want to thank our development team headed by Kevin Brisky for the great work that they did on their end to help help that tenant move in. It's always a big deal whenever you get a restaurant tenant. This happens to be Five Guys. I should mention the name, Five Guys Burgers. It was long anticipated and is finally here, and they're open. So we're happy that they're here. And another addition to the many the food and beverage establishments that have chosen University Place to set up business. And then on the Parks and Recreation focus, we have underway the significant inclusive playground. You've seen the renderings. Well, now you can go and drive out to Cirque Drive, and the installation is looking like the rendering. So it's rare that, we've shown you, renderings of buildings, and we hope that they turn out to be like the rendering. This one does look exactly like the rendering. So go take a look. It's being put together quite quickly. There's parts have been shipped in on, I guess, multiple trucks. So I don't believe that all the parts are here, but maybe so. But Jack has been and his crew have been monitoring that. They prepped the site. It wouldn't have been possible unless Public Works and Parks prepped the site, which they did beautifully. So I just want to mention to that. And we look forward to a ribbon cutting, of course, with the council and members of the community there. So stay tuned. We'll be announcing that hopefully soon. Chair, that is my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Appreciate that. We'll go around to council and get reports as well. And I'm going to start with Councilmember Boykin, please. Anything you'd like to report, sir?
I just a couple of things. Let me just first say that conspicuously dropped name of that restaurant. They make fantastic burgers. I will just share that with you. Got a chance to enjoy that since they've had a chance to come and choose University Place as their place of doing business. So thank you for that and all the hard work that went along with doing that and the consummate leadership that Kevin also provides to make those nuances just really special. And in no surprise to me that businesses continue to choose the City of University Place. I had just said a couple things about reporting out. I want to give a shout out also to leadership and staff, Steve Suggs, as well as Leslie Blaisdell, about where we are with the proposed bicentennial budget. Just fantastic one more time that it looks the way it does. I want to call out specifically the debt management highlight of more than $17 million being reduced as a result of really thoughtful consistency that's come alongside by council, as well as the expectation of those types of really important opportunities are brought to council so that the reaction and the support can happen well. None of this stuff happens accidentally. It is really very intentional, very planned, and those types of things are the good things that come as a result of good planning. So just wanted to do a shout out there. For me, just wanted to really underscore the fabulous community event of Oktoberfest. My, oh my, oh my. Great time indeed. It was fun. The enormity for me is that the residents had a real good idea of what was to come, evidenced by the record turnout in the engagement, the exciting contribution for me was I got a chance to really not keep all of the wonderful trinkets that underscore I love the City of University Place to myself. I gladly would have kept them, but they emptied out the bags at least 2 different times, and it was a great chance to engage and have fun hearing about why the event was so well attended. So it was just a good highlight for me, and just enjoyed it tremendously. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyd. Councilmember McCluskey, anything you'd add?
Right, thank you. I too attended Oktoberfest and met my 3 other colleagues there, and it was a great fun event. It was lively. The evening was very nice. The rain held off just a little bit, but everyone seemed to have a very exciting time and enjoyed a lot of the food vendors that were out there. And I have to confess, I have never been in a Five Guys. Yes, that's true, but I guess that's going to have to change because now we have Five Guys in our town center. And I hear they do have a vegan burger, so I think I might just, have to try that. And hopefully it's amazing as the carnivorous one that's on the menu. I attended, as well as Councilmember Grassi, the Princess Tea from Community Connection Place on Saturday. The ambiance was amazing. The decorations were outstanding, sparkly. The princesses came in, and the little princesses all the way up to the something old princesses with their sparkly crowns. And we had a really good time. Wonderful entertainment. It was very culturally driven. There was hula dancers and folkloria from Mexico, as well as other dancers. Dance Theater Northwest was there, giving a little hint of their Nutcracker Ballet that's coming up in December. So it was, just a lot of fun. It was fun to see the princesses dancing around in their princess outfits in the aisles. On a more serious note, I did attend the Pierce County Regional Council meeting, and they went over the 2025 legislative proposals, which they're being vet out, and they compared that with the AWC and the county legislative proposals too, and then there was about 5 cities that provided their legislative proposals, and there was discussion on that, so that will continue. There was a presentation by the Pacific Northwest Veterans Programs by the co-founder Josh Wielden, talking about veterans and homelessness prevention and other benefits that the group provided. And he indicated that if a city would like to partner with this organization, they could come on and create a fundraising drive to help augment this program, either buying a flag pin or doing veteran banners along the city streets that we have seen in other cities and towns, or just do a fundraiser for veterans relief. He's happy to come to the meeting and give a presentation so that how we can best partner with this nonprofit and to help fund some of the programs for the homeless veterans that we have in our community. And with that, I'll conclude my council comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you, Councilmember Worthington. I have visited Five Guys several times, and on Friday, on opening day, was there. Great job to our team getting them open. They are excellent, quite excellent. So I encourage you to visit Five Guys. We had a great time, great staff, friendly environment. I also attended the Alta ribbon cutting along with Mayor Pro Tem Wood and Councilmember McCluskey. 274 new housing units that are open in our city, and I was very interested in talking with Christian, their manager over there, that's really working hard to bring in the local small businesses around their development to try and enhance a great partnership and specials for the local small businesses. So I will be helping him with that as well. So it's exciting to see thoughtful people that come into our city and want to expand and make the surrounding businesses better with their presence. So thankful for them being here. They are serving a lot of military families, students, and young professionals. Oktoberfest was, like has been said, wonderful. Great job to our team. Thank you for all of the hard work. The weather was excellent. I enjoyed being there with my colleagues. We had a great time. So thank you. The thing that I heard over and over was, I did not know that we had this. This was excellent from people that came. They were excited that it was for all ages, that they could be in the beer garden if they wanted to for more of adults, but they also had things for kids. So great job at keeping all of the ages happy. It was a wonderful time. As Councilmember McCluskey mentioned, the Community Connection Princess Tea was a great event to raise funds. I want to say a special thank you to Magic and Pacific Northwest. They're a great company. They served that event. They're at Oktoberfest along with our other city highlights. And Nariana does a great job leading and just gives back to our community. So thank you to them along with Dance Theater Northwest and so many others. I also want to highlight Happy Duo. They are, you might know them for coffee, but they are now open for lunch and brunch. So if you haven't had a chance to visit Happy Duo and make your way down there, they're a great other local business that's expanding their menu. So I want to make sure that we support all of our small businesses. But thank you to our staff. Again, I think there's a lot of people putting in extra hours between the budget and the comp plan and the events and planning, and we just have a stellar team. So I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work. Public safety, everyone. All the hard work does not go unnoticed. Thank you.
Very good. And Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is beginning to sound more like a commercial for Five Guys, but what can I say? That's always been one of my favorite places. In fact, most people don't know, Five Guys got its beginning in Washington, D.C. So when I used to travel back there, that was the first stop I went to before I went to any other business that I needed to tend to there. Back then you ate your peanuts, threw them on the floor. I don't know how they've got it set up here, but to echo the other comments, it is a burger place in and of itself that is indescribable, but great. And now I'm happy they're here because I don't have to travel to D.C. or anywhere else for that matter. I did have a chance, as other council members did too, to attend the Homestead Park groundbreaking for the new project that's going on there, and it's been really exciting to see that piece of land that the city acquired back in the very beginning of this city. It was most people may not remember, it actually was a residence, a single family home there that sold to the city. And then watching the evolution of that property into a park in which all citizens here in the city can enjoy. And looking at the new phase and the development, I'm very excited for its multi-use that they're bringing with that. Also, like other council members, attended Oktoberfest, and just kudos. I mean, kudos to the staff that make that event happen every year. As Councilmember Boykin pointed out, it grows year by year, and they're adding new attractions, and there's something in that program for everyone in this city. I had the opportunity to actually go to all the vendors and say thank you just for being there. I think it's huge that they come. One vendor that I stopped at happens to be marketing free EV charging stations. And they're free to city governments under a federal grant. So I don't know if our staff was aware of it or not, but I've got their flyer. It says here to business owners, but I asked, does this apply to government? And they said absolutely. So they're the level 3 chargers that the government's purchasing for cities. So if we have an interest, hint, hint, that's worth checking out for us. I think it would be a great opportunity to save some money for our citizens. With that. Also had the opportunity to go to PRCC along with Councilmember McCluskey. It was really it was a good meeting from the standpoint that the focus of the legislative priorities, as she pointed out, aligned very much with what AWC is doing and what Pierce County is doing. So what I enjoyed out of that is watching the alignment of the various governmental entities, how we're all kind of joining forces with, although separate, but almost a single voice, and how we bring bring things forward to our legislators. And I'm sure looking at what's been proposed there, and I think we're going to have a presentation later on this evening regarding AWC, so I'll hold those remarks. But how they're all beginning to align, which is really, I think, pretty awesome with that. I also want to echo the comments about the Pacific Northwest Veterans program that Mr. Wielden put on. I would encourage our city manager and others to connect with them if possible. Not only do they bring some of the programs that Councilmember McCluskey pointed out, but they also provide a support network for veterans. And I know our city has quite a few veterans here in the city that would truly benefit from that networking. They're tied into every veterans organization throughout our region. So they're kind of like the hub of the wheel, if you will, that pulls it all together. So that was a great presentation. Short of that, I think I've hit everything I needed to tonight, so I'll hold my last remarks for the agenda item. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. And Mayor Pro Tem Wood.
Thank you, Councilmember. I do have a few quick comments. First, I like Five Guys. Big fan. Second, I was also at the Homestead Park groundbreaking, and I would like to thank the Parks Commission and city staff for the work they did in doing the planning and preparing for what's going to happen in Homestead Park. I think it's going to look great when it's done. It's going to really become, I think, a more public-friendly, family-friendly space for our community to be at. I was also at the Alta Apartments grand opening, and my takeaway from that, besides that they're really nice apartments and it's a really cool place to live if that's what you're looking for, I spoke with one of the key developers of that project, and he was very vociferous in his compliments to city staff about how easy it is to work with our staff to get projects done, especially compared to many other cities in the region. He much prefers to work within the city of UP, all other things being equal, just because of how good our staff has been working with him and their team. And then finally, I had the honor of representing our city at the change of responsibility of the senior warrant officer with our partner unit on JBLM, the 16th Combat Aviation Brigade. CW5 SLED yielded his responsibilities to CW5 Zimprich. And it was a great ceremony, a great opportunity to just be there with our partner unit. And I look forward to seeing them at some future city events. Thank you.
And I'll make my comments brief. And I feel obligated to say I will enjoy having my first Five Guy burger here in University Place. So we can all weigh in on the issue of Five Guy, but glad to have that opportunity to do it here in UP. I also, I didn't make it to the Oktoberfest. Instead, I went to a landmark birthday for my son, my oldest son, in Bend, Oregon. And while I missed Oktoberfest, and I know it's a great event from the previous years, it was also nice to celebrate a landmark birthday. So, and I think I'm going to let my comments go at that for this evening, and we can move on to our study session. So, thank you all. We're going to conclude the regular meeting and open the study session. And with the study session, you can notice the change of scenery we've done here. We're going to invite our partner in public service, West Pierce Fire and Rescue, and the Fire Chief Sharp to join us and tell us about some things coming up on the ballot, so we can all be well informed. Chief Sharp, thank you for joining us tonight.
Great, thank you. First off, I'll just say thank you for having me, Mayor Pro Tem Wood, members of the council. I really appreciate you making me very hungry for a hamburger. So I'll try and get through this without my stomach growling. Yes, we do have a ballot measure coming up on the general election, and I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to share with the council and the community as much as we could about it, as we're taking a look at something that's very new and very different. Our community's been has funded our fire department the same way for about 50 years now. So this is a significant change. And so, as it says here in the title, what is a fire benefit charge? Because
No one's heard that term before in West Pierce, so we haven't done that before. So talk a little bit about what's happening and just as important, what's not happening. So on November 5th, we'll have a ballot measure in which we're asking the community to consider a different methodology in how we calculate what someone pays to the fire department for the services. What's not happening, though, is this isn't a request for a funding measure, a different amount of money on top of our existing funding. It's not a new tax. It's not a renewal of an existing tax. Quite often, you've seen me come to council before and talk about the renewal of our M&O levy. We just renewed that a year ago for 4 years. This is not a new funding measure on top of that. It's actually just a different methodology to actually calculate how we collect our funds. And so I'll explain a little bit about how that works here. The way our funding works is it's divided, the money we receive is essentially divided into 3 slices of pie. And the first one is an EMS levy. The other one is our regular levy. And then the third piece is our maintenance and operations levy. All 3 of those levies are property tax levies. They're based on the value of your property, and that's the same for all 3 of them. What we're proposing in the election is to shift to 3 different pieces of pie, and we would keep the EMS levy. It would be unchanged, but the fire levy would be reduced by a statutory limit, would get reduced by a third, and the M&O levy would go away. It would be gone, and it would be replaced by something called a fire benefit charge. So the first 2, the EMS levy and the reduced regular levy, would still be property taxes, but the fire benefit charge is not a property tax. It's a fee based on calculations that are done related to the structures on a property and how big they are, what they're used for, and what fire risk hazards do they contain. So at its core, by switching this to this methodology, it lowers the property taxes of property owners and shifts it into a different methodology. The funding that comes to the fire department is still whole. It's just redistributed and calculated in a different way. So, as I said, an FBC is not a tax. It's based on size, use, and fire risk factors only. It doesn't apply to land. It only applies to the structures on a property. And since it's calculated on those 3 things, it doesn't care about what the value of the property is. If you've got a home that's a small residential home and it's on 10 acres and it's appraised very high because of these 10 beautiful lush acres, that's sort of irrelevant because the land doesn't factor in just the building. If it's got a view and it's on a lake, that doesn't really matter because it just comes back to what is the structure and what is the fire risk involved in that structure. The fire benefit charge considers that those who benefit more from the services of the fire department should pay that equitable share for those services. So why this matters and why we're bringing this forward, there's a couple of reasons. The primary driver why we're bringing this forward for the community to look at is one of the things we've heard, which I'm sure at times you have heard, and most folks that are in government have heard, is that people are frustrated with property taxes. We're a state that leans very heavily into property taxes. And it's not that they're necessarily frustrated with the fire department. It's more of a cumulative fatigue over property taxes. It's, fire districts, library districts, cities, states, everything seems to be funded by property taxes. So what we've looked at is this methodology because this shifts it from a property tax methodology and will help reduce some of that. And we feel like that's a good response to what the community is asking to see. They're asking to see an opportunity and an option to do something different. So the other issue is when we looked at this and started looking into it, there's definitely some discrepancies within the current system that we have today. And I'm going to kind of showcase some of this based on 3 different fires that we had over the summer a couple of months ago. They all happened within about 2 weeks of each other, about 10 days apart. We had a fire in a residential home, we had a fire in an apartment building, and we had a fire in a large commercial structure. So first I want to talk about the apparatus that responded to these 3 different fires. We send fire engines, medic units, squads, ladder companies, chief officers, all kinds of different folks converge when there's a fire. And on this house fire, it required 12 different pieces of apparatus to respond in order to bring the fire under control. The apartment building, however, took a few more vehicles. It takes a little bit more work. It's more complicated. It tends to be multi-story. When you talk about apartment buildings, they're taller, they're bigger. A lot of residential units all packed together very closely. More units to search, more units to clear, more things to do. And so it takes a few more vehicles and apparatus, and it took 19. But that large commercial structure that I'm talking about actually took 40 different units to bring it under control. It was a big resource draw just for that one call. Now, each of those vehicles have personnel, of course, and our fire engines and ladders have 3, medic units have 2, and chief officers travel alone. So in total, when you look at each of the vehicles that responded to these calls, the house fire required 24 firefighters to bring it under control. But there was a need for 50% more people to respond to the apartment fire. We had 36 firefighters to bring that under control. Again, more things to do, more things to address, more issues to handle. Commercial building, though, double that again. We had almost 80 firefighters who were required to bring just that one fire under control. The next thing we looked at was time. How much time do we commit to these various different types of fires? And different vehicles are there for different lengths of time. If medic units can clear early, we try and get them out as soon as we can so they can be released to go do other calls, because as long as they're sitting at this one fire, they're unable to respond to any other emergencies in our community. So we try and get them released as soon as we can, but medic units might leave early, maybe some chief officers, but maybe then fire engines have to stay a lot longer because they're doing some cleanup and different things. And so collectively, all the vehicles that were on scene at that house fire, it was a collection of all those vehicles. We added it up, and it was 20 hours of out of service time. That's 20 hours that apparatus were out of their first 2 areas that were committed to this one incident, and I'm unable to go handle any other calls. However, that apartment fire, it takes a lot longer to search all the units. It takes a lot longer to clear all the units of smoke, do all the different things that have to happen, ladder work, roof work, all the different components that get involved in a more complex fire. And so we had units on scene for a total of 75 hours. The commercial fire, however, we had units over 300 hours were committed just to that one fire. The vast majority of apparatus that responded to that fire were there between 12 and 15 hours in total. This all starts to add up exponentially when you now start talking about people. What was the staff resource commitment to this? And you take all those people that responded and you look at how long they were out of service and what the commitment was. That's where you really start to see the disparity between the different types of buildings that are in our community. A residential fire takes about 29 staff hours for us to bring that fire under control, whereas the apartment building took about 145 staff hours, and yet that commercial fire was over 600 total staff hours, which, as you see there, is about a 2,000% increase, or the equivalent of about 20 of those residential house fires in just one single incident. So there's definitely different types of structures, size, how they're used, what kind of fire risk factors do they have. They have a different draw on services, and they have a different need for fire protection services. So that's sort of the basis of what a fire benefit charge looks at. And then, as I said, the current system we have, it has some inequities in it, sort of built into it today. And so there's a lot of people that feel these inequities aren't really justified, and there's maybe a better way to look at it. So let's give you a couple examples here. And one is looking at 2 residential homes. And these are average size homes in our community. They're about 2,600 square feet. One home is appraised at about $480,000, which is probably about average appraisal for a home this size. However, residential home number 2 is appraised at $1.5 million. Has a view of Puget Sound, beautiful view, but the view really doesn't change the fire risk of this building. It's the same size, same use, same fire risk factors, yet that home, because the assessor treasurer says it's worth 3 times as much, they pay 3 times as much to the fire department to protect their home. Under a fire benefit charge, both of these homes would pay a lower amount in total in what they pay to the fire department. They would pay the exact same amount in fire benefit charge because they're the same size, same use, and same fire risk factors. They would still pay a different amount to the fire department, though, because, as I said, the EMS levy won't go away, and the reduced fire levy would still be there. So there's still a component that is based on property tax value. So it would be sort of a mix of property tax and fire benefit charge. Fire benefit charge would be the same to both of these homes. The amount that they pay to the fire department, however, would be slightly different. Taking this one step further now, here's another example of some of the disparities that we see within the current system. And this is that same residential home with a view of Puget Sound, $1.5 million appraised value. And yet on the right, you see a commercial building that's 13,600 square feet, more than 5 times the size of this residential home. It's commercial, industrial use, hazardous materials, a lot of different things going on in this building. But what it doesn't have is it doesn't have a view of Puget Sound. It doesn't have nice, sidewalks and manicured lawns. It's just in an industrial area where typically appraised values are going to be more depressed. So it's appraised at the same value of this home, and therefore these two properties pay the exact same amount for the fire protection services in their two very, very different properties. 5 times the size, different fire risk, different use, yet they pay the exact same amount. Under a fire benefit charge, the homeowner would pay a lot less fire benefit charge than what the commercial property owner does, because again, it's based on those 3 factors of size, use, and fire risk. So if this was to be approved in November, this would go into effect in 2025. So in 2025, we would start to have a fire benefit charge. The final 3 years of our maintenance and operations levy would get vacated. It would go away. And the statutory rate of our regular levy would be reduced by 1/3. So that would all go into effect immediately in 2025. For the end user, if you will, the taxpayer, well, I say it's not a property tax. It's going to look and feel very much like a property tax. It doesn't change as far as how you pay it. It will come on the property tax statement. The assessor treasurer does that on our behalf to place that on the property tax statement. So it's collected the same way. So if someone pays it directly, they can pay it directly there. They don't have to write a separate check to the fire department for fire benefit charge. If it comes out of your escrow account through your mortgage lender, that is paid the same way as it would be for a property tax. So it's seamless as far as how it's paid, and it's identified on your property tax statement. As far as discounts for those who maybe with their age or disabilities or their income, they may have some discounts on their property taxes currently. All those same discounts and exemptions apply to a fire benefit charge the same way they do with a property tax. And it's also under IRS code, it's also tax deductible just as if it were a property tax, even though it's not a property tax, it's a different benefit fee, but it's still covered under IRS code. So in many ways it will look and feel like a property tax, but it is calculated very different from a property tax. And generally speaking, single family and duplex fall into that residential category under the formula. So residential homeowners, single and duplex, as a general rule, would pay less overall to the fire department for total services compared to what they are paying today. We ran the numbers based on 2024, and if it were applied in 2024, we estimated about 80% of residential homeowners would have seen a decrease in what they paid to the fire department overall. So again, we feel this is a good opportunity to present to our community based on the feedback that we have heard in our fire commissioner meetings that folks would like to see some level of property tax relief. This is the one methodology under state law that allows fire districts to charge under a different way. It's used fairly widely across the state. More and more fire departments are moving this direction. There's currently about 12 fire departments across the state that use it. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but many of those, I think pretty much all of those, are departments like West Pierce where they cover multiple communities. So in total, it's about 33 cities, towns, and fire districts across the state that are covered by a fire benefit charge. Here in Pierce County, Central Pierce Fire and Rescue uses a fire benefit charge. They've probably been using it just about as long as anybody in the state. They've used it since, I think, around the mid-90s. This came into state law in the late 80s. They were one of the first to adopt it. And so from Puyallup down to Graham, they use a fire benefit charge, and then Graham Fire and Rescue also uses a fire benefit charge. And Ording Valley Fire and Rescue also uses a fire benefit charge. So a fair amount of communities in the Pierce County area are currently under a fire benefit charge. It's, as I said, it's becoming more common for fire departments to use this method to calculate payments to the fire rather than strictly using a property tax methodology. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. I'll just put this up for those who are in the audience or might be online. They could always go to our website. There's a lot of information there, FAQs and videos and more information on this. Trying to get out and talk to people about something that's very new and very different and somewhat complex. And even though, you know, it's on the ballot measure and it's in the voter's pamphlet, you only get so many words to try and explain a very complicated thing. So it's not always easy in 150 words to tell people what's going on. So that's why I'm here today, and I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak.
Well, Chief Sharp, thank you for being here as well, and appreciate you sharing your the details. This is different, and it's important that we get information out about it, and we understand it as a council, and we understand it as a community. So, very good. We do have a few minutes for questions, and so we want to stay close to our agenda time, but Councilmember Fleming, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chief, thanks for being here tonight and certainly for the presentation. Very informative. And I know I've had folks already asking me, what is this thing and what does it do? And the best answer I gave them was, I don't know. So thank you. I really appreciate it. If you'll indulge me, I've got several questions. If I might, I'll try to limit them though here. The first one, you talked about in that apartment fire, it took 40 units, 145 staff hours to bring it under control. So if those size structures are sprinklered and they're designed to minimize fire or the spread of fire, I guess my first question is what failed there, and then how would this new proposal change that?
Well, I will say sprinklers are something that I don't mention in here, but it is a piece of the equation as well. So when we're calculating the amount that's paid, there is a discount for buildings that are sprinklered. So there is an incentive to put sprinklers in these buildings. I honestly, to be honest with you, I don't know if that building was sprinkled. I assume it may have been. I'm not sure what could have been the reason why that failed. There's a lot of reasons where even if the sprinkler was working, depending on how the fire started. Summertime, we have a lot of fires that can start outside of the building where it's not sprinklered, and then by then it makes its way into the overhead. Barbecue fires, things like that can cause those type of things. I don't know the specifics of the investigation on that fire, how it came about, and I don't know for sure if it had sprinklers, but there is a discount in the formula for sprinklered buildings.
Okay. And then my second question is, I heard you say two different things on the fire benefit charge. One, it says it doesn't change much how an owner pays. They'd pay about the same. And then the other comment you said is it will be a reduction in charge to the homeowners. So which is it and how does that work?
Yeah, my apologies. What I was inferring is for the homeowner, it doesn't change much the process in how it's paid. It comes on your tax statement and it's paid the same way you pay taxes today. So the process of how you pay it is really what's the same. But the amount and the calculation is very, very different in how we calculate it. And as I said, we estimated, had this been in place in 2024, about 80% of residential homeowners would have paid less in total to what they pay today.
Okay. And then lastly, if you would for me, under the current rules of engagement, the voters get to vote every 4 years, I believe it is, on the levies and the bonds and what have you. With the tax benefit charge, who sets the rates, and then do the voters ever, once they've passed it, do they ever get an opportunity to provide input of, yes, I'd like to continue this, or no, I'd like to change it?
Yeah, those are great questions. So once it's voted in, it can be voted in for 6 years, 10 years, or permanently. It's new to our community, and we have opted to go with the shortest allowable amount of time. So it'll only be in place for 6 years, and then there will be a vote again to reauthorize it. During that 6 years, it is adopted annually by our Board of Fire Commissioners through a public hearing. So there's actually each year there's opportunity for community input and community involvement to be a part of the process of discussing what the fire benefit charge amount looks like and how it is structured. So there's touch points each year for the community through the public hearing process, and then in 6 years there's a renewal process to renew that. Is
that a one-time renewal, or is it every 6 years thereafter?
It If it's renewed again, it can be renewed in 6 years, for another 6 years, 10 more years, or permanently. But at that time, you have to choose and put on the ballot which way you're going. I can't say obviously what they will decide to do in 6 years, but it's not a permanent renewal unless you actually choose to go that direction.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Chief.
You bet.
Councilmember McCluskey.
All right. Councilmember Fleming asked all of my questions except for a few.
Sorry.
That's okay. So so if they're going to be voting on it in another 6 years, it might be of a good benefit to establish that in the property tax so that they could see how much of the savings in particularly the M&O in the regular levy reduction is, so that when you're coming back around again, when the people are previewing their property taxes, they'll see that reductions if you're a residential or a duplex owner.
Yes.
Probably not so much for the multifamily units or the commercial buildings. More than likely, they'll see an uptick in that.
Yeah, I think that, I know that definitely there will be a shift in responsibility that will go to some of the certainly the largest commercial buildings that we have. And, we've got a real change in what the community looks like out there, especially in Lakewood, where we've seen a lot of the commercial warehousing that's becoming really predominant out there. We had to go, our largest building now in the community is almost 500,000 square feet, which is about, it's over 10 acres under a single roof. So it's a very different type of risk that we're looking at nowadays from what we had, just 10 years ago. So definitely there will be a shift in responsibility for that based on, the size and the use of some of these structures.
Right. Is that why you're bringing the fire benefit charge now instead of like 20-some plus years ago when it was first implemented?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we looked, last time we looked at this was about 12 years ago, and at that time, we didn't feel it was the right for our community. We didn't, I'll be honest, we understand it much, much better this time. It's really a complicated thing to sort of change, and think differently when we've, for 50 years, have only worked in one arena. But also, at that time, it probably wasn't real prudent for us to do it in the way we did. It was a renewal year for our M&O levy. So the choice was, do we go to this new methodology that the community is not familiar with, or do we go with an M&O levy? And at that time, it just felt like the right thing to do was go where our community understood the process. This time, we chose to analyze it, look at it, and put together a package, but establish the M&O levy first, and now come back to the community and say you have a choice. If they choose to change, we can change to a fire benefit charge on January 1. If they don't like this idea, then we will just continue forward. We'll still have 3 years remaining on our maintenance and operations levy. So our funding is set either way. And last time it would have been, had we failed the fire benefit charge, we would have basically lost a third of our funding right there, and then had to come back and try and fix that problem. So timing wasn't well thought out last time, and in the moment it just didn't feel right. The community has changed a lot in 10, 12 years. Definitely the demographics have changed, the buildings have changed, and we think certainly the community is asked for some of this change too. So we think it's the right time to present an option for the community.
Okay, but they'll still have ballot measures for the EMS levy and the regular levy reduced.
Yeah, if there were to be lid lifts brought forward for either of those would be
right.
Those would require a ballot measure.
Right. All right. Thank you, Chief.
All right.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember. Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem Wood or Councilmember Boykin, do either of you have questions?
I have a question, or if you would like to go ahead, Councilman Boykin, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just acknowledging I do have questions, but no worries. If I can jump in here, that's fine. Thank you first, Chief Sharp, for the presentation. Very informative, has been mentioned. I am always thrilled to hear people talk about innovative ways to introduce equitable impacts. I think that is always important. When I think about there being a chance where there could be a different way for folks to see property tax relief or their impact when it comes to property taxes being outside of a space and still get benefit by being able to be a resident that care about our overall service to it. Again, I think that's pretty nifty. So innovative, informative. I appreciate it. I've got one question about really understanding the impact as you have related to 3 different ways in which structures and size could impact really resources and service hours. And you had made mention of the possibility of not knowing about one response, whether or not the building was sprinkled, was equipped with sprinklers, I should say. So in that regard, I just wanted to know what would have been reasonable or anticipated in terms of resources and hours response that would have made it more palatable. I'm just trying to get a gauge on really what is appropriate, more aligned, if you will, in what you see. That's one question. And the other question I had is in regard to the options, the 6 to 10 or permanent. It would seem to me that if permanent ever was chosen, that's it in terms of voters being able to weigh in and impact their future when it comes to these services and these options. Wanted to make sure that that's what I was understanding, or is even after there is a vote that could possibly be permanent, is there some recourse or measure that I'm overlooking, or is that really it is what you said it is? So those are my 2 questions, Chief Sharp.
I would say that the 610 or permanent are the options that are out there. That they all have to be voted on. There's slightly different voting requirements to renew at 6 and 10 years is a simple majority. However, to go permanent is a super majority, so it is a higher bar to reach. So there is a bigger lift to go permanently. Personally, I can only speak for myself. I certainly can't speak to what will happen 6 years from now, but we felt strongly that it was important to go with a short term, the shortest term we could, which is 6 years. I personally like to get in front of the community and tell them what we're doing. I'm pretty proud of what we do, and so I like to let them know what we're doing and make sure that they can know that their tax dollars are being invested in something worthwhile. So I think it's important, and it's good for the fire department to bring these back in front of the community on a regular basis and have the community dialogue. I personally don't feel like a permanent solution would make a lot of sense. But again, I can only speak for myself today, and right now our decision has been to go with the minimum, which is 6 years. And I have to apologize. I'm not sure I understood exactly what it was you wanted in the first question as far as the resource commitment.
I guess I was looking at some type of comparison. I know you brought these different situations to us to demonstrate what it would be like to have a different way forward, this more equitable fire benefit charge. And I think in one of the situations, and I apologize, I can't get you more specificity, but it was Councilmember Fleming that had asked about the actual resource and response times, and I got the impression that they were out of line. As one more reason to talk about what the fire benefit charge could do to make things more equitable. A bigger building, bigger size would command an appropriate response that would presumably be more equitable, given that who that building belonged to, so to speak. So what I'm looking at is, since there's going to be an outlay anyway, is there something that would have been something that we could control that said that these resources or these particular response hours are out of line, or is that just something that we just discover with each and every time where there's a response that's appropriate for you and your team as you provide service?
I would say that, those times are not out of line. Those are fairly typical of the different types of fires that we see. Actually, we had 2 other fires in that same 2-week span, and there was 2 other residential fires. One was put out fairly quickly, and one took longer. And so I took the one in the middle because it seemed like a great average of 3 fires, just to show a typical example of what a house fire would be for us. I apologize if I didn't convey it well. What I was really trying to show with that comparison is just the idea that buildings of different size and different complexity that are used in different ways, whether it's multifamily or it's commercial use, or that have different fire risk factors by the types of business that they do, require us to utilize a lot more resources when there's a fire that happens in them. Not only that, they require us to have a lot more resources available to fight those fires. And so we have to our funding gets committed in a certain way to try and be prepared to protect for those emergencies. When we have commercial businesses that deal in a lot of hazardous materials, we now have to fully fund a hazardous materials response team to be prepared for that. If we didn't have those in our community, we certainly wouldn't be funding those resources. And so these types of structures that are in our community, based on their size and their use and the different hazards and fire risks that they bring into our community, require us to build and construct our fire response in a certain way, which obviously costs money to do that. And therefore, the intent is that the fire benefit charge would lean more heavily into those that are driving some of those costs, those buildings that are larger, have more fire risk, and used in ways that are more likely to draw down on those resources. Does that help answer that question?
It does, Chief Sharp. Thank you so much. Understood. I appreciate it. And now I'm following that much more clearly, the equitable distribution that you talked about when you say this could be an option forward as opposed to what we've had currently. Thanks so much.
Very, very good. Well, Mayor Pro Tem Wood, I'm going to give you the last question of the night on this.
Thank you, Councilmember. So my question hopefully will be a fairly quick one. You mentioned that the key factors in assessing a fire benefit charge are size, use, and fire risk factors. For a residential homeowner, size and use are pretty much set. Are there any fire risk factors that they can affect that would allow them to reduce their fire benefit charge? And for example, I'm thinking you put a sprinkler in your kitchen or something like that. Is there anything they can do to change those risk factors?
Yeah, generally speaking, residential homes, as you said, they're going to, the size is the size, but the use and fire risk factors are generally universal with residential homes because they're all used in the same way, and they don't. The fire risk factors are really, a continuum of what type of business is it and what type of business is operating in there. Is it a quilting store or is it a fireworks factory? Those are two very different fire risk factors, and they fall into different categories under the NFPA codes. And so residential homes, generally speaking, are going to all fall in the same fire risk factor. And the only way that would be reduced is exactly as you just said, is through working automatic sprinkler systems. Those do receive a discount both in a commercial building or a residential home as well.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, well, very good. Well, Chief Sharp, again, thank you for being with us tonight, and I really appreciated hearing about this proposal, and also it's always a pleasure hearing you talk about the details of this. It's fascinating for me. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And with that, we're going to move on to our next item. That's going to be the 25-26 biennial budget and our second study session dealing with a little different set of the information with Leslie's help.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director, here for the second study session of the 25-26 proposed biennial budget. So the 25-26 expenditure budget is a status quo budget with a modest level of inflation assumed for supplies and services. The first study session was held on October 7th, where we reviewed revenues, and there were 3 public hearings scheduled, the first of which occurred earlier this evening. Any changes made during the budget review process, study sessions, would be included in any final documents provided to council for budget approval, which is currently scheduled for November 18th. For the benefit of our residents watching this evening, the full budget document is posted on the city's website on the Finance Department page, should you want to download that. In preparing the budget, we continue to be conservative with revenue projections and expenditure projections for the biennium. The budget assumes the annual statutory allowed increase in the city's ad valorem property tax rate in each year of the biennium. And tonight we're going to focus on expenditures, community grants, and new item requests related to the 25-26 budget. The budget is prepared. The operations budget are at core service levels. CIP projects continue to use local dollars to leverage grants, and 3 new FTEs have been added beginning in 2025. On the debt management side, we have included the early payoff of the 2016 bond debt, which reduces our outstanding debt by $17.1 million. And the remaining debt payments will be made according to their scheduled debt payments. The budget includes staffing of 64.975 full-time equivalents. And like I said earlier, it includes 3 new FTEs, 1 public works maintenance worker, which was approved as part of the swim fee increase last year, another public works maintenance worker, which was part of the vehicle license fees approved on October 7th, and 1 landscape technician to replace 2 part-time positions that are currently budgeted. And this came up when we brought it up earlier this year as part of the carry forward, and as it came up during council one-on-ones. So Jack Eklund is here to explain how that transition from 2 part-time people transfers to 1 full-time person.
Yes, thank you, Jack Eklund, Director of Public Works. And I know that we've talked about this a while, but it is, so from an actual FTE equivalent on the landscape position, it's still actually the same FTE, although it is certainly more expensive to do a full-time employee than 2 temporary employees. One of the challenges, now this was we had shifted gears about a year ago to change from contracted landscape services to doing it in-house due to lack of performance by contracted services and also increased costs. And it became more efficient to be able to do it ourselves at a higher quality. Part of that proposal, however, was to go with a 1 full-time employee that is budgeted, and then 2 of these part-time temporary employees that were 6-month positions. Unfortunately, the challenge was hiring the 6-month position. It's we often have luck with a seasonal 3-month position, and we did this year as well. Just as in the summer time, we have higher intensity for certain maintenance needs, and the 3-month position is very attractive to like college students or people looking for something for the summer. But kind of surprising to us, a 6-month position was not appealing to very many people at all, and so we were unsuccessful throughout the spring, the summer. We tried recruiting. We even many options. We then even went to a temp agency to attempt that, which the costs of that were quite a bit higher, but we needed to fill that need, and ultimately the temp agency took a long time to get someone, and ultimately that person didn't work out. It wasn't the skill level we needed. So in evaluating, since that option really was not feasible, we did evaluate what we can do, and we know that the full-time position, a permanent one, that's what people are looking for. Now, it does mean during the peak hour, and I'm thinking my traffic engineer there, peak time of year, we would have in the previous scenario had 3 people working on landscape. In this scenario, you do have it'd be 2 full-time people working on it. However, we would be able to supplement that with some of our college students in the summertime. And some of the other positions, other park employees could supplement some of that if we needed. However, we also believe the full-time employee has a lot more efficiencies than the 2 temporary seasonal employees, because that employee already would then understand the system, be able to be able to do its work on their own. They take a little bit more ownership. There's no revolving door every year if we theoretically could hire people. But the training going up to speed. So there would be quite a bit of efficiencies in that regard, and so they'll probably get a little more bang for the buck on a quality level. And then also in our current scenario, it was only the 1 full-time person then for the other 6 months to still maintain all of the landscaping in the city. And although there is a lesser demand in the fall and winter, it's not a 0 demand or a third of the demand. So having that second employee has a lot of benefits, managing all of the landscaping with 2 people all year long. And then also they do provide a little bit of backup in emergency services, from a street standpoint. So if, let's say, this year we're anticipating the weather service folks think we're going to have a heavy snow year. When we have those, you have the street crew is on call. They're working 24-hour shifts to maintain the streets. And so having that additional body on the park side can help fill in the gaps for some of the other services we're doing while the street folks are taking care of street plow and so forth. So ultimately, like I said, it is a little bit more expensive from the budget standpoint, around $50,000 a year more. However, that additional cost has been in all the budget projections that Leslie has been sharing, and was factored in when we were looking at some of the other budgetary conditions, and so it doesn't put it's not an additional drain on resources from what's already been presented, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. So this is a good time to ask a question. All right. Specific to this. So one of the questions that I had in my one-on-ones, there were several, but maybe we can use this to illustrate the question. So when you have 2 people, you have 4 hands. When you have 1 person, you have 2 hands, hopefully, or generally. Anyhow, where that really is headed, if you, for example, have a 12-foot piece of irrigation pipe, a little hard for 1 person to move it or to handle it appropriately. That second person can grab the other end. It might make a difference in how you program your work. That's really the question that was coming to my mind. 1 person may not, frankly, fill all the need if you need someone to hold the other end of the pipe. And that's succinctly put what my question was about. Does that come up?
Well, in this case, it isn't. Although we're focusing on, in this case, the 1 person replacing the 2 6-month positions. Overall, from handling landscape, it's really changing 3 people in the peak time to 2 people during the peak time. So you're never going to have the single employee anymore. In fact, it addresses that. It actually, the comment you're having for the non-peak time, this actually enables us to be able to do more of those things. So it really, in the off times, you then will have those 2 people to handle the things, and does make it more efficient and useful. So yes.
All right. Do we require certain certifications in this position, such as a pesticide application, a license, or something specific to the nature of what they do?
So it's not it's not necessarily a requirement for to get the job. However, it is something that is ultimately required to be able to get. That is definitely something that we would provide that training, and that individual would need to strive for that certification.
Okay, but not an entry-level requirement, but
Yep.
it's one of the things you build to as you move from Class 1 to Class 2 to Class 3, or whatever, however it goes. Thank you. Those are my questions. Council, anybody else while I've interrupted the Councilman McCluskey?
Thank you, Jack. And you thoroughly explained it to me in the 101 staff meeting, and I appreciate that, and the benefit analysis and the value added of having 2 FTEs all year round, and how you would augment it in the summer months, which unfortunately didn't happen this year. My question is, in the budget, when it breaks down all the full-time equivalencies, the Parks and Public Works comes into 20.27 FTEs, and then in the engineering services you have 9.73 FTEs. Is that the same person creating a whole? You see that?
Yes.
See that?
So part of
how
how
do you
that
have
works-
a quarter time and then a 3/4 time?
And mostly that's me, because I'm in both places.
Oh, that's you. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, that's where.
You're in more of this, I could tell. So how do you divide all that up?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, that makes that clear. Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
All right, thank you. Council members online, or excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Boykin, questions for you at this point?
I have no question. All I have was kudos. Just getting a little over my skis. Just really excited about what it is that we've been able to see move forward through, again, excellent leadership and excellent planning. Just underscoring again, none of this is by happenstance. It is very particular and very meticulous, and no questions as a result of one-on-ones and just really good engagement.
And if I could add really quick, I'm appreciating more the idea of having FTEs, especially with your Councilmember Worthington's comment on like certifications, because if we had to recertify people every year because they were a 6-month hire, that would again reduce efficiencies. But if you have one person you can certify once, that makes a whole lot more sense. No, good idea. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're good. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. So as I stated before, the budget is a status quo budget with a modest level of inflation assumed for supplies and services. Regarding to COLA, we have included a 3.8% COLA for staff in 2025, and that's based on the June to June CPIU. And then we estimated 4% for 2026. Benefit increases, we have been provided with the numbers for 2025, so you can see that we have some increases to medical and dental, and a slight increase to FMLA in 2025. In 2026, we have used estimates. We hope we've estimated on the high side, just to make sure, but we won't get those rates until the end of 2026. Our expenditure budget, this is on page 39 of the full document, if anyone wants to look at it within the full document. If you look at 25 and 26, there are not huge changes in departments. The biggest change that impacts, as you see, 25 is 45 million, 26 is 75 million. That seems extreme. That is based almost entirely on the debt payoff, because the debt service has the $17.1 million payment in there, and then interfund transfers also has a $17.1 million transfer. It's kind of a double count in the way that works. So I just wanted to point that out. There are some new item requests included in the proposed budget. They total $977,500. $130,000 of that is related to 25-26 council goals. On the screen and in the memo, we have listed the goals related, the items related to council goals. We've noted on the left which council goal it supports, and then the costs. Of the items identified, only 3 had additional costs that were needed to be included in this budget, and all of which were one-time costs, so not ongoing. The other new item requests were made by departments, some of which are ongoing, and we've identified that on the chart. The digital asset management system, that is a $15,000 annual cost and would be ongoing through this biennium and into the future. This has all been included in our budget and our forecast. There's some one-time items, the phone system and council AV system. Parks and Public Works has requested some replacements of some infrastructure due to wear and the fact that parts are no longer available. There are 2 larger ticket items, these one-time costs, salt storage and the replacement of the de-icer storage. Those are both required by our NPDES permit. And then there are a couple items, there's an item for a pickup truck and the stand-on lawnmower. And all of this has been included in the proposed budget and the forecast, so the numbers we've provided you include all of this. Did we want to see if there were any questions specific to any of this before we move on to community grants?
Council, any questions at this point? I'm not seeing any. Once, twice, and done. So, okay.
This budget does include a budgeted amount of $10,000 each year for community grants. Pursuant to our policies, to continue this appropriation in the upcoming biennium, we need reauthorization from council. So we focus on this during this meeting to make sure that council is aware of what it is. Historically, both TACID and the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center are budgeted to receive $3,000 each, and an additional $4,000 has been appropriated previously just as a placeholder for any requests that could be brought to council for other organizations. Each year, TACID and Crystal Judson provide us with a report of services that they provide to University Place residents. Once that report is received, then we will disperse the $3,000 to them. And I did include their 2023 reports in the memo in case anyone was interested.
Leslie, if I may, have we often, we don't usually get requests, we don't usually...
It's been many years. Years ago when this was first started, there was a process to fill out a form, and TACID and Crystal Judson were the only 2. Mm-hmm. But we have left that additional money in there. I believe that process is still on the books.
It is still on the books.
Still on the books, but
it dates back to 2008.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's still on the books, and if council were so inclined, it would probably be appropriate at some point in time to revisit that, because there is some old legacy language in there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I bet I know the term. Okay. Yeah. All right. Excuse me. Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember. I just wanted to echo my thoughts on that, because that was something that came up in my one-on-one with Leslie in regards to process for the application of the grants and how we do appropriate that. And I think it would be timely to kind of maybe update that process and make it clear, because from what I understand right now, it's apply and go for it. However, the apply process...
The actual process that council outlined back in 2008 is all of one page.
Okay.
So we can distribute that to council in due course.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Simple. It's simple.
Okay.
Councilman Worthington, I have a quick question.
Certainly, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wood. Please continue. Mm-hmm.
Just a quick thought. If that $4,000, which apparently hasn't been claimed for years, whether it's due to process or lack of interest, I would suggest that perhaps at the end of the year, that $4,000 be divided between our current applicants, TACID and Crystal Judson, just so it's not going into the ether or whatever. I know it doesn't do that, but it just might be appropriate to align it with the the organizations that have applied to the city for existing grants. Just a thought.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else on this subject? If not, we'll roll on. Mm-hmm.
So lastly, I just wanted to talk about our next steps. We do have one more study session, which is on capital improvement programs and any final changes. We'll have our second public hearing on November 4th and our third public hearing and council action on November 18th. So I'd be happy to answer any more questions related to the budget.
Let's see. Council, do we have any further budget questions for Leslie at this point? Are we good here? And online, anyone? I don't see anyone. Then I think we're going to move on. And at this point, thank you very much. Appreciate your help. And we now are 2 of 3 taken care of, so that's great. We're going to ask Kevin and Kenneth to join us. And thank you again, Leslie, for the help. As we get to talk about the comprehensive plan update.
Yes.
Like we've got it all up and just about ready. So, all right.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Kevin Brisky with the Community and Economic Development Department. Here tonight to continue the discussion regarding the city's comprehensive plan. This is the 4th study session this year that we've had with the council. And also there was an additional one last year. As you are aware, the Planning Commission had multiple meetings on this as well. There's 10 elements within the comp plan. At the last several meetings, we've made it through 8 of those. So this is the continuation of that to get to the last 2 chapters, which is the shoreline management chapter and the parks and open space element as well. With that, I will turn it over to Kenneth George, and we have a couple slides on each one of these, and we'll open it up for questions after he discusses the shoreline.
Very good. Thank you. Kenneth.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be able to present the last 3 remaining slides that we have to complete our presentation on the comprehensive plan update. Before you here is going to be the shoreline management element. We'll start with this one. There's 2 slides here. Overall, the next 2 chapters, the last 2 chapters of the comprehensive plan are a little bit different than the previous chapters, in that shoreline management and the last element both have separate standalone documents and requirements of their own, and the element is really complementary to those separate plans. The shoreline management element is a separate plan known as the Shoreline Master Program, which is governed by the Shoreline Management Act, and that one has its own periodic update cycle, and that one was the Shoreline Master Program, which is also codified in the University of Haight Municipal Code, and was last updated in 2018. And it's subsequently updated every 10 years. So the next update for that Shoreline Master Program will be in 2029. And which on shoreline alone, I could spend a whole study session on it in and of itself. But for the purposes of the periodic comprehensive plan updates, our goal was to ensure that any changes in that 2018 plan were reflected in this current update. The last time the shoreline element was updated was actually in 2013, and following that, the comprehensive plan was updated in 2015. And so then the shoreline master program was then updated in 2018. So our goal with this element was to ensure consistency with any of those updates per the shoreline master program. So, to conclude, there really weren't a whole lot of statutory requirements at this point in time. Those requirements largely come when the Shoreline Master Program is updated. So we wanted to just update, sure that everything was consistent. We went through the Shoreline Master Program, or the Shoreline element, to clean up language, but the policies in and of themselves weren't really changed, except if there was anything that needed to be updated per the last master program element update. You might notice if you do go through the plan itself, it does look like it was completely strict through, gutted, and changed.
Yes.
So I want to assure the council that those policies that no policies were changed. We went through the shoreline management element. When we went through, me and the rest of the planning team, when we were looking at this, didn't have some consistency in the way it was organized and structured. It was completely different there than all the other elements. So we took an opportunity to look at how we could update it and ensure that it was consistent with the rest of the plan. We met with our regional shoreline planner from the Department of Ecology, spoke with them on our requirements to update. They agreed that there aren't a whole lot of statutory requirements at this point. They're mainly concerned about the Shoreline Master Program, which we did not touch or amend.
Okay.
So what we ended up doing was there's huge large sections that looked like they were stricken through. Some of those things were taken out and moved. So when it shows that it's strike through, a lot of time that was just moved to another part. We also went through and kind of itemized all of the goals and policies there, and found some similarities to other goals and policies, and took an opportunity to combine one or two, a handful of policies that were very similar, and combine them into one policy. The other piece that was different with the shoreline management element was that following every policy was a discussion that doesn't appear in any other element in the comprehensive plan. So what we did was we took that little discussion piece that followed each policy and combined that into the policy, so that the policy in and of itself would stand alone on its own merit, and didn't have, but the extra context and some of the language that was in that discussion was stricken and then included into the policy itself. We sent all of this to the regional shoreline planner, the Department of Ecology, and we had a subsequent meeting with them to ensure that they had looked at this and that they were okay with the changes that we were making, which were intended to ensure that this element was consistent with the rest of the comp plan in terms of the way it was formatted, the way it looked, and the way it flowed. And they didn't have any comments. They agreed, and again, where their biggest concern was the codified Shoreline Master Program, which is in the municipal code, not in the comprehensive plan, and we weren't touching that. Okay. For example, wanted to just show what that looked like here. There, again, the policy, it showed the policy, and then there was a discussion piece following that policy. So we pulled out the elements of that discussion, included them into the policy itself, so that policy would stand alone without the extra discussion component, which again, the rest of the comprehensive plan, that's not included in there. All policies sort of stand on their own.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready for questions on this section.
Do you want to take questions or move?
Is there another one on this line?
No, this is the
question. Yep. Questions?
Yes, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ken, I was tracking everything you were saying, and I appreciate the synopsis there with working with DOE. But what caught my attention was typically you look at the recommendation on changes that come to council, council approves those, and then you go to DOE and you say, hey, this is what our city's going to do. are you okay with it? But what I heard you tonight say was staff made the changes, they went to DOE, got the approval, and now we're back briefing council on what those changes are. So if we make changes, you got to kind of go back to DOE and start over with them. What was the thinking on that change in process?
Well, the thinking there was, and we didn't really get their approval. Because we didn't change, we moved some of the goals and policies, but again, their approval was largely hinged on the Shoreline Master Program, separate from the element. So we went to them to ensure that that reorganizing and restructuring the element itself wouldn't fall out of favor with what they'd be concerned with. And it was more or less just a cursory, like, are you okay with these changes? And they didn't have any concerns with it. Their big review that they're going to be doing is on the Shoreline Master Program itself. They are less concerned and less involved in the element portion, which is complementary to the program.
So if the council were to make any type of an amendment to what you proposed here, that doesn't change anything with DOE then?
As long as it didn't, if they didn't make any changes to the Shoreline Master Program, which is not being proposed, then I don't believe that they would have too large of a concern. They probably want to see it, what those changes were, but other than that, they weren't heavily concerned with the element itself.
Okay. I just want to be sure. So, because at the end of the day, the council's got a thumbs up, thumbs down, or modify it, whatever they choose to do on there. I'd hate to be in a situation where we've gotten a preliminary approval, the council said, we don't think so, and they change it, and then you got to go back and start over with them again. Okay. Thank you.
Then did you have a question as well? Go ahead, Councilor Plesky, then I'll follow. Okay.
I was really concerned with all those red highlights, and I'm glad that some of those details, because I like some of those details in it, are being transferred into the codified plan. My question is, I know the Puget Sound Energy had comments on the comp plan and some of the energy components to it and the shoreline pieces as well. Did we take any of their considerations and comments and incorporate them into the comp plan?
In the comp plan as a whole, yes. As for the specific to the shoreline element, I don't believe they made any particular comments on this element. Again, we weren't intending to change any of the policies, the intent of the policies here.
Okay. And the graphs that you have here, I couldn't really read them, so if you can resend them to me. I tried to blow them up. I used my magnifying glass and everything, and I still couldn't see exactly what it said. You know, the font is blurred on it, so if you can resend it to me in an email so I could see exactly where those lines go and what they actually mean on the notations, I would appreciate it. And also, my last question is, you talk about the ordinary high water mark. Has that changed any over time? Has the ordinary water mark changed in the last 10 years, let's say? Since, we're getting global warming and the tide is coming up, so what's the...
The ordinary high water mark was established by basically a shoreline biologist who goes out there and does a site-specific review and determines the ordinary high water mark. So flood elevations have changed. FEMA has changed flood elevations, but that's different than ordinary high water mark, which very likely, could have changed, but it's determined on a site-specific basis where somebody, a property owner or whoever is looking to develop or find out where their ordinary high water mark is on their property, they hire somebody to go out there and make that determination.
Okay.
You can kind of guess by looking at aerials and see, but if you're not an expert, you can't make that determination without going out there and doing the analysis.
Okay, so the property owner does that to figure it out.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, great. So a couple of questions I had, or maybe it's one question, regardless. So I can appreciate it's helpful to have the striker version or strikeout version. It at first glance is a little, oh wow, that's a lot of change. And I'm still left, as I hear about the description, thinking, maybe there is a lot of change. So the community, my sense has been, the community's been highly invested in the Shoreline Management Plan and the Shoreline Management Program. And there's been a fair amount of, Winston Churchill would say, blood, sweat, and tears that have been spilled on the paper. So some items are rather special or sacred. Those might have to do with things like views, heights, and some uses. Is there anything in the reworked policies that might drive changes as we apply those policies to the program or to ordinances over time? Have we inadvertently stumbled into something that may change some of that sacred space, as I view as views, heights, and use?
Yeah. I would say that that wasn't our intention into changing it, and we certainly don't have to take this strike-through approach if that's the direction the council doesn't wants to take. And some of those other requirements will come about again when we do the Shoreline Master Program update, as you mentioned. And I'm thankful for that our requirements to do both the comprehensive plan update and the Shoreline Master Program update don't overlap, as it would be a lot of work.
And we have I'll just follow up, we have we actually have basically an analysis that shows where all the existing policies were and where they were potentially moved or combined with the overarching goals of preserving views and beach access are all still in here. They've just been streamlined, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Okay. It's hard for the layperson on the outside of the process to look at this and kind of, these things are so intertwined. But you are taking the first step first, meaning you work on the plan as policy statements, and then you apply that to your program when that update comes, also within the rigors of the state's requirements. But okay, all right. Well, I think that answers my question. It isn't to say I wouldn't. Well, what I'm trying to figure out is I don't want to inadvertently make change. If we run it through the community process, and the community says change, different. If we do it as a way of sort of, oops, didn't mean to, not so good. So, and that's just what I want to be aware of. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? And anybody online in terms of Councilmember Boykin or Mayor Pro Tem Wood? We're all set to move to the next element?
Wonderful.
Mr. Chair,
I heard, right?
Yep. Mr. Boykin, or excuse me, Councilmember Boykin, would you like to ask a question?
I think, Mr. Chair, just thank you. I am really trying to allow us to move forward, recognizing what the process is designed to do, and that we still have, if there's any uncomfortableness or any aspect that deserves more weight, in my view, from the process, there's an opportunity to do that without belaboring conversation tonight. I certainly appreciate what has been shared of what the sentiment was, particularly when it came to policy alignment. It is a lot of red. It begs the question for me, the interpretation of ensuring that there's now alignment with policy. And it is it's worth a subsequent conversation. I just don't think this is the venue to have it tonight, but I'm appreciative of what has been explained to me, what occurred, and just looking forward to more information being revealed, at least specifically for me in the process. And there, again, is room for that without challenging council or putting council in an uncomfortable situation. So I hope that sentiment is understood.
Appreciate your caution. Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Wood, you're good from what I can tell?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move on. Thank you. Next element.
Right. Thank you very much. The last chapter of the comprehensive plan is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space element. Otherwise, we'll refer to as the PROS element. For short, there, again, similar to the Shoreline Master Program, there is a completely separate standalone document referred to as the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And so we'll refer to that one as the plan, and in the comp plan, it would be the element. The current PROS plan was updated and adopted by the City Council in 2020. Since the last comp plan periodic update was in 2015, all we did to update the element was to ensure that the goals and policies in the element were updated consistent with the 2020 PROS plan. Most of which were simple and minor changes when we went through the PROS plan. And the PROS plan contains a whole separate goals and plans for parks, recreation, open space for the community. The element itself mostly outlines the actual goals that are in there. The plan itself is much larger than the element. So we went and looked through all those goals and policies, updated them into the element, which were very few. There was hardly any. One such example, though I would provide here, is the only new on your screen, the only new policy in the 2020 PROS plan that was not in the previous PROS element, and so we took that out of the plan and included it into the element. Lastly, the full draft of the amendments to the PROS element was reviewed by the Parks Department as well as the Parks Advisory Commission. So Parks has had a chance to review these changes and vet those out for Council's review. This is probably one of the least touched elements of the comprehensive plan. So with that, not only does that end my presentation on the PROS element, but the overall presentation of the 2024 comprehensive plan update, which again intended to meet the city's statutory requirements for the state's Growth Management Act to periodically review and, if necessary, amend the city's comprehensive plan. Happy to take questions.
Yes, on the policy there, but first off, thank you for such a succinct presentation on the element as opposed to the plan, or both perhaps. But regardless, do you have any action steps that are that follow this proposed policy change? For example, does this lead to a certified local government organization to be developed?
The element does not have any actions listed with it.
Okay, I think that answers my question for now. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Lukowski.
All right, thank you. And thank you for bringing up the one actionable change in the document. On the table 10-1, page 10-7, we have the UP tot lots called the playground, but there's no playground there. It's dirt. And then on the Rekanazutu property, it says open space and wetland, but it's a walking trail. And then Kobayashi Park is a preserve, and I'm not sure there's fishing there. So I think Conservation's futures would kind of frown on the fishing activity.
Okay, I'm looking at, we're taking a look at table 10-1.
Yes, so those are my questions.
Comments, yeah, Colgate Park was, there's the proposal to add tot lot line, and that must be something that was from the PROS.
the UP Tot lot. I'm thinking that's University Place School. There's a little corner there that we used to have. Is that what that's referring to?
Yes, that's that little extra space next to UP Primary.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there, yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say it's not a playground. I don't know. One person wanted it to be a pickleball court, but so, and then the I never can say this property correctly. The name Rikanazutu property. Thank you.
Italian
It's a
interpretation.
There you go. It's a walking trail is there. I walked it several times.
Okay, we can add that.
Okay. And then the Kobayashi Park is a question and a concern that about the fishing part to that. There's, open green wildlife corridor. We have a trailhead, kind of picnic area, but no fishing. I wouldn't kind of frown on the fishing piece in that property, but I'm not, because it's a preserve. So I'm looking at Mr. Kaiser to correct
We
me on
can
that
pull
or
the
not.
conservation future covenants
Okay.
and see if there's any restrictions in effect.
Okay. And then maybe in our 101 staff, we can discuss that. Yeah, because I was on the Conservation Future Board when we were talking about Kobayashi and, yeah, okay. And then so it's what the impacts to historically marginalized communities would be on page 10-12. Are we going to have to study that aspect of that? Or has the study already been done?
There was a study already done as part of the comprehensive plan update to state requirement to do a racial equity analysis report. And one of the bills, House Bill 1220, that was passed prior to all the jurisdictions' adoption, requirement to update the comprehensive plan, all of the policies were updated to include very similar language. So it kind of passed down from PSRC to the Pierce County countywide planning policies. And so that language has been incorporated. And then I believe when there's other years to other periodic updates, we may likely have to continue to do some sort of racial equity analysis as part of the periodic updates. But one was done for this one.
Okay. And any actionable items that came out of that for us? You can talk to me in the 101s if you like about that. So you can pull up the document and refresh your memory on that one. Because I'd be really curious and interested in that part of it. Okay. And then and I also want to note the policy of the Pro 7B. And Councilmember Wood, I think you would be very interested in an aspect of it in regards to promoting the creation and placement of art in various public venues. And I'm kind of interested in expanding the placement of public art into maybe doing some pop-up cultural activities surrounding that as well to enhance the cultural environment. But that's something I wanted Councilmember Wood to take note of, and we can have a discussion later on that. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. And I think we're good on the council's dais at this stage. How about our colleagues online, Councilmember Wood or, Mayor Pro Tem Wood or Councilmember Boynton? Would either of you like to make a comment at this time?
I'd just like to thank Councilmember McCluskey for pointing that particular line out to me. Thank you.
Okay.
I thought you would.
And of course, those are existing policies, so you have that authority now. So.
And I'd just like to say good work. I think the policy that had been identified where you had asked if there had been any actionable items as a result, and the answer currently is no. I think within the new policy, it begs the likelihood of elevating CBOs that are really doing some impactful things, and specifically making sure that they are called out for, as it reads, leveraging the funds in the right way when it comes to city pros plans and comprehensive plans. I think that's a good strategic idea to just be aware of in terms of where council can make a difference and where we can help ourselves differently. So I want to say good work there, and hopefully something actionable will come out of the new policy adoption.
Thank you. All right, I think that may conclude us for the comp plan. These are the last two sections or elements, your choice of terms. And so we're going to be ready for consideration and public comment or hearing at which meeting?
December.
I'm sorry?
December 2nd.
December 2nd. So if there's members of the public that would like to make comment about what they've heard over the last several meetings, December 2nd we'll have an opportunity before council takes action. That's just all I wanted to add and put a date on it. So, yeah. All right. Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Good. And thank you to the Planning Commission, too, for their hard work. There's a bunch of that hard work demonstrated here. So, that, I think, will get us on to the legislative report. And Councilmember Fleming, I think you get to start us with that. Is that correct?
That is correct. I get to kind of lead off, but I think the staff is going to be batting cleanup on this one. So I think while Eric gets set up here, I'm just kind of set the tone. As we had said earlier under council comments, there's been a lot of work done by a lot of the governmental agencies throughout Pierce County, and trying to really align the legislative agendas that's going to go before the 2025 legislative session. Earlier this year, the Committee for Legislative Priorities Committee for AWC met, started the project. When you've got 281 cities with 281 ideas, it's interesting to see how you've got to work through to get that process in place. I just wanted to thank the council for the opportunity to represent this council in the city on that committee. We met during the AWC summer conference down in Vancouver. There were over 100 legislative priority proposals that were put on the table at that time. And the committee worked diligently. In September, they met again, narrowed that list to 31. And then from then to now, they have now been able to subgroup and pretty much narrow things down under 5 category topics that are in your packet tonight. First one is physical sustainability. The second is behavioral health treatment capacities. 3 is the housing supply. 4 is public safety. And 5 is infrastructure investment. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of supplemental documentation that goes with each one of those priorities. And I know Eric is going to be taking a deeper dive tonight with us on each one of those priorities. So with that said, I will yield to you, Eric. Thank you so much. Oh, before you start, I do have to put a commercial on. I have to do that. If you haven't marked your calendars, the 2025 conference is going to be June 25th through the 27th in Kennewick. So
Kennewick, okay.
Start making your reservations now.
Yeah, really, particularly in Kennewick. All right, well, very good. Well, with that, we're all set to go with your help, I believe. Eric Faisal is Assistant City Manager and Legislative, wannabe Director? Anyhow, we're looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Worthington, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I'm Eric Faisal, Assistant City Manager. And thank you, Councilmember Fleming, for serving on the committee. That has been one of the council's, it's a shift in priorities. We've noted over the years we've had challenges in getting policy issues that are specific to UP and not necessarily specific to AWC or one of the larger jurisdictions. We've had trouble having any traction on some of those issues. We've been far more successful in
funding and capital budget requests. And so one of the council's changes that you did last year was to encourage council participation on AWC's Legislative Priorities Committee, and thankfully we've been successful in getting a member of the council on that committee and have influence in drafting their policies. Of the 5 policies, and I should back up a little bit and say, the draft legislative agenda that you have before you is just that. You know from prior years that this is really a conversation, this first study session on the topic. This is your policies. Staff has identified some, particularly as it relates to those identified by AWC that are specific to us. But I know that each of you might have individual priorities or items that you'd like to discuss, and we've included those in the draft on page 72, I believe it is, of your packet. Looking very quickly at the AWC policies under fiscal sustainability, we've included, and maybe I should go actually to the actual document in your packet, and I'll draw your attention to the actual memo that we have. And I don't know if we can pull that up, just so everyone at home can see as well. I'll go ahead and start while they search for that. So I've identified 6 areas that are on AWC's legislative priorities that seem applicable to us. The 3 of them relate to public safety, and so if you look at their agenda, 3 of those, breaking it down, include issues related to officer recruitment and retention, and this also includes funding for the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. Just so you know, in your most recent police contract, what we would be charged would have been about $4,000 for this year. The state has paid for this year. Not sure about next year, but even if they don't, if they do, then that we won't owe anything. It was identified. It's for 2 years.
I believe it is included. I think it was a multi-year funding they provided for.
I thought it was, but I wasn't sure if it was just this because of the biennium issues. But in any event, it's a very nominal amount, so it may not rise to the level that you think it might, but there might be years in the future where this particular item could be applicable to us, so I included it in there. Second was additional funding for municipal criminal justice assistance account. The city receives a substantial amount of money from that account, approximately $1 million a year, so it broke it up into different categories. So if that were to increase, that would potentially benefit us significantly. The third deals with juvenile crimes and in juvenile behavioral health treatment. This is an issue that our chief has reported on before, and you've heard even in the news about the extent to which juveniles are involved in criminal activity, some of which is self-generated, some of which is part of gangs, and some of it is organized crime. I was asked a question during some of the conversations about this, to what extent are these issues related to Raymond Hall and our ability to get juveniles placed into Raymond Hall. I've talked to the chief about that, and if necessary, he can expand upon it. But that is a local issue and an issue dealing more so also with the courts. So that wouldn't necessarily be directly related to this particular issue. There might be other programs or policies that the state could implement. The local issue is one that we're having to deal with differently. Next, we have the 1% property tax cap, which AWC has identified in multiple years as a challenge for cities. I've included this recognizing that the council has no interest right now in increasing taxes. We've fully funded our public safety fund. thanks to voters. All of our property tax revenue goes to the Public Safety Fund. This is more about looking long-term and an artificial cap placed on cities by the legislature that is not tied to anything. It was part of a Tim Eyman initiative way back in the day. It passed but was declared illegal, and the state legislature implemented it anyway, thinking they were implementing the will of voters. However, the percentage does not relate to population increase, inflation, which we've seen more recently. So the idea would be to get the legislature to amend the cap. I think AWC has proposed 3%, the lower of 3% plus population or population and inflation. So this would not necessarily benefit us in the current biennium or even maybe the next 8 years, but it might benefit in the long term if that was revised. Next was the direct meaningful investment into local infrastructure. This primarily relates to preservation of pavement maintenance, or preservation of our roads, and the more core local infrastructure that the city is responsible for. We're addressing some of that through some of the resources that the legislature has provided us through Transportation Benefit District or vehicle license fee. But over the long term, even that dollar figure is capped out. So over the long term, you might have an interest in seeing other options or maybe some direct state funding for something like that. Then lastly on the list was authorizing more flexibility in the use of existing city resources, and what's identified there is the real estate excise tax. There are a number of city resources that are that the legislature has authorized us, but has said that we can only spend it in certain ways. It is not subject to council prioritization and weighing of the costs and benefits of certain items. So during COVID, the legislature authorized more flexible use of REIT, for example, and that would be one that we would encourage more flexibility on. This was part of our prior legislative priorities list for 2024 and 2023, and there was some discussion. There were bills in the legislature, but they didn't progress. Then we have included 3 state capital budget requests. One is from 2 of them are familiar from last year: Day Island Bridge design, $800,000. Traffic signal upgrade project, $500,000, and then a new item which is Alameda Drive street lighting improvements for $1 million. And lastly, for the federal agenda, we've included Day Island Spit Road, enhancing the seawall and raising the road a little bit. And do you want to talk about those first before you talk about all of the list of items that the council members have?
So below these we have 4 different council member suggestions with an additional dozen or so projects. Council, shall we talk about these items to begin with and then move on to the others? Does that work for folks? Yes. All right. Okay, then let's go back through and so Eric, are you looking for some indication of council support, if you will, for each one of these, or what's your objective?
So ultimately, we need to get to a place where I can craft a document that you can vote on in a regular council meeting. So where we see head nods of about 4 of you, that would be really good. Yeah. Our good city attorney here won't let you vote, but if we can get some sense of direction as you individually talk about it, that will help me craft a document.
All right. And as you're doing that counting, non-counting, just keep in mind we have 2 folks online that are not necessarily quite as visible in their head nodding unless you look carefully. So, all right.
There we go. We can see their faces.
All right. All right, great. Well, shall we talk about, where would you like to start?
We start with the first one. We can just do them in order.
And this is the police officer recruitment, or rather training?
Right. Officer recruitment, retention, just increasing resources available for these sorts of things.
I have a comment on this. Does anyone else want to make a comment first?
Well, go ahead.
This is a nice to have, $4,000, where the next time we get a new officers could be 3 or 4 years from now. This is a nice to have, but it doesn't do that much for us. We can put it on the list in my view, but I don't think it should be at the top. So, yes.
I was thinking along the same lines. We're getting 8 new officers, and we put in, as you said, money towards that end. So every year we'll go through the legislative priorities, and we can always revisit this. And if we feel that it rises to the cream of the top again, we can put it back on. But right now, I'm thinking that we have other things that will rise up instead of this one.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric, just a real quick clarification. The $4,000 annual, is that regardless of how many officers go through the academy, or is that per officer?
It's per officer, and this is for this year. So I don't know what future years it may be.
The number may be different.
Right.
I know in the AWC's priorities, they were looking at the coming year, not so much the remainder of this year for their priority.
I was just giving you an example. I don't know what the cost will be going
So, my take on it would be it's not the highest priority, but certainly something that we could support. If it's, as our law enforcement team grows, it's a little offset, and it helps.
Councilmember Plesky.
Thank you. I'm looking at this more of an internal university place priorities that we would like to, because we only have so much to prioritize. We could populate this with 30 different things, but we trying to succinct it into about 5 or 6 so it would be more palatable.
Yeah.
I would concur with supporting the AWC piece to it, which includes that, because for sure the training of new officers is highly important. Even regionally, because it does impact the university place, because we're not an island unto itself. But as to the other prioritizing going on for the next year, I don't think it rises to that top to note it in our city's legislative priorities for the...
I think we're saying the same thing, just a little
you
bit
were?
different. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were. All right.
Okay, good enough. And I'm on board with that.
That's okay.
As well. Just succinctly,
then, yes.
we only pay for training when we increase the head count on our number of officers. Not every time we get a different officer, they come trained. So it's only when we go from 18 or 26 to 27 that we would incur this expense. I think it might be a while before that happens again. But I'm all for having it on the list. I just don't think it should be at the top. And I'm hearing that from my colleagues. And anybody, we don't need to comment on every one, but if you have something you want to say, you're certainly welcome to. And I'm looking to our online folks just to give me some indication. Okay. I think we're good. That's where I'm taking it. All right. Eric, next one.
All right. And I guess I should also clarify is that, unlike some cities, we don't have a lobbyist. So the way we utilize this most is when council members have opportunities to talk with our elected officials or city manager or I are talking with city. So it is important probably that it is a more concise. We do create a flyer card, 8.5 by 11, that we hand to council members, or we've done, not council members, legislators. We've done smaller, more pocket-sized versions as well. But it really is to focus a little bit more. So,
Thank you.
All right. So the second one is municipal criminal justice assistance account, local funding, trying to get additional funding for that.
So just to clarify, this is more money. It isn't 500,000 more or 100 million more. It's more money.
More money.
Okay.
Because it's a pot that gets distributed to all cities based off population. So put more money in the pot means more money for us.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Yes, I fully support that, especially going along with the school liaison officer that's coming on board, and also my opportunity to have worked in the school district for a couple years. I think this is sorely needed, more funding to support our juveniles and our youth, to put them on the right track would be important and a focus, because they are our future. When we get older, they're going to be setting policies for us. So let's do a good job in the front end.
Okay. Anything else there? And this is number 2, right?
Number 2.
Number 2. Okay.
Councilmember McCluskey talked about number 3 as well. But.
Yeah. I'd just like to say I concur with Councilmember McCluskey, but I see it tethered very strongly to item number 3. Funding without programs to mitigate, it seems backwards to me. If we need to do, I think, our best foot forward to request programs to mitigate on the front end before we get behavioral health support for our children. I know that there was also something that it was on the AWC priority but wasn't listed on ours, and I added it to my list, mental health support for students. But I see all of this being in conjunction together. If we don't solve one problem, we can have all the funding in the world, but we have to do better for our youth. So I don't know how, again, I am again tethering 2 and 3, but I see both of their importance rise together. I wouldn't want one without the other, if that makes sense.
So from a discussion point, we're linking 2 and 3 together. That's fair enough. So just we're all on the same page, so to speak. All right. Anything else for our online council members and Mayor Pro Tem? We're good there? Okay. Great. Do you need something further on the
No.
Okay.
Nope, I got that one. I got both of those, and I'll combine them. The 1% property tax cap.
Folks? So Councilmember McCluskey.
I'll jump in first, and this time I will focus on number 4. And right now I'm not in favor of that, since we've already increased the property taxes. Maybe looking at it again, I don't want to put this clearly off the table for future discussions in future years. But right now, we did utilities and all those fees, and I just don't have the will or the heart to support that at this time.
Okay. Other council members?
Concur with Councilmember McCluskey, for the record.
All right. So Councilmember Grassi, and I'll just jump in. I also feel as though we may want to wait on this particular one as far as we go. We'll cheer from the sidelines, but go get an AWC, I suppose. But nonetheless, our citizens have stepped up, and I want to respect that. But other members?
Ditto.
Okay.
All right. I think we have enough direction there.
Support.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next is more investment into local infrastructure for preservation and M&O.
Pretty broad. I'm trying to think if we any particular focus on. I mean, I think roads, but I don't know that that's really what this is about. So
that's about the category I was thinking.
Okay. I just wanted to be able for the council to put it in context. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question for this before I come to a determination. I know the Public Works assistance account is low, and it's already having a hard time affording some of the commitments that they have. They're about a year behind. So,
I don't know, Jack, if you want to speak to this at all.
Right. Is this part of the number 5 equation? And would this also bring more funding for private roads? Not private roads, public roads in residential areas.
I think it's, it's kind of broad. It could be anything. It's really just more, so many of the initiatives and the different things that were targeted statewide came down and hurt the local governments, especially in terms of infrastructure maintenance and that sort of thing. And so what this is really looking at is kind of trying to restore some of those, the things we used to get as support from the state for our infrastructure that we just don't have anymore. And that's the general gist of what that's going for. It's not particularly specific. It historically, the funds that had been, I think this is trying to kind of target, had not really looked at private infrastructure so much. It was more focused on public. So I think that's the gist of what that one's going for.
Okay. Another question for you, Mr. Eklund, is in light of some of these other requests we have for capital improvements in our transit, how important is this number 5 to the overall next 2 years, what we're focusing on and doing, and how will that impact some of your grant opportunities that are out there? I'm not really interested in having the legislators present the city with a tax for our citizens in order to glean money into this fund. So I would not be in favor of it in that perspective. But if they were to put money into it and we can get grants, then I would be very interested.
Yeah, it is very broad and somewhat aspirational at this point, right? So it really is more targeted for just identifying that need, that there is this gap of overall, infrastructure needs and services. And so there's not a specific direction at this point other than just we're lobbying to keep that on the forefront of those legislators' minds and see what we can happen. I think I'm saying that, yeah. There's not a specific, itemized proposal.
We're not looking for more grant funds, loan funds.
What?
Right. We're looking at grant funds. Not looking for more loan funds.
Right.
But we are looking for mechanisms to enhance M&O costs, because there are there are funding sources, particularly capital budget, stuff like that, to do projects. But then who's maintaining them? What resources do we have to maintain them?
Mm-hmm.
And they've given us part of that through the vehicle license fee. But are there additional resources or programs that might be useful?
If it's not a taxing option, then I would be interested. If it is, then no.
Okay. And like I said, I think it's more aspirational and programmatic. It'd be, even if you look at, if all it resulted is them coming up with another option for the city, I don't think it would be, we're requesting them to oppose a new tax on things. It's more giving options, and there still would be some authority from our end of things, I would assume. But it's still very broad and aspirational.
It could relate to just increasing flexibility.
Thank you. And I want to add Councilmember Fleming to the conversation, if that's all right.
Yes, right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to put this in context so the council understands how this came about.
Okay.
First, I want to underscore, none of the cities are advocating another tax. Like us, they don't have the stomach for that. But there was a lot of conversation put around this because of the limitations we have, especially with the mandates we have from the state to say you've got to accommodate more building, more construction, higher density. But there is no support to build the infrastructure to support it or take care of your current infrastructure that you have. So, if you take that and tie it into our discussion and debates we had on the $40 tax that we were trying to get to this summer so that we could maintain our streets and roads to accommodate that growth that we're having, we struggled to get there, and as Eric had eloquently pointed out, we have fixed the problem now, but we haven't fixed the problem indefinitely. And the other cities and towns recognize the same situation. So what they're asking for in this, and why it's intentionally vague, is because it's not just about streets, and it's not just about bridges within communities, because that came up as part of this conversation, but it's also sewers, it could be other things that cities and towns see as their need to maintain and build and support support the growing infrastructures or the growing capacities that they have. So for that reason, I'm 100% on board with this to support it, because it really does check the box for us in many, many areas. As we continually look for opportunities and how are we going to pay the bill as the city continues to build out and add maybe additional streets or street improvements or street lighting or street stoplights or sewers or water or whatever, and we've got a big bridge that we need to take care of. This would provide at least a voice at the table with the legislature to say, hey, we need some additional funding sources, not necessarily a tax, but maybe there's other opportunities out there right now which we don't have access to. So, you know, what AWC is saying to the legislature, get outside the box and see what else is out there. So, of all the things I saw there, this is one that had my attention, and I thought, yeah, we definitely could get behind that.
Okay, well, I'll be supporting that. Okay.
All right, thank you. Other comments on item 5? Mayor Pro Tem, or, yes, go ahead, please, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a quick thought. Would this cover without the unfunded mandates, such as like, you know, stormwater management when they increase requirements, forcing us to increase the fee? Would this line item kind of incorporate that element as well, or are we just looking at maintenance and infrastructure?
It's a great question, because some of that stuff is federally mandated, as I recall, going through that. So that's an area the city, or rather the state, doesn't have control over. So I would probably err on the side of saying, no, it doesn't address that. But I will make one final sidebar comment since I got the floor at the moment. Infrastructure was one of my things that I had asked to be added to the list on the back side, but it didn't get there. But be that as it may, I'm a big fan of this particular one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Boykin, anything on your side?
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
All right, very good. I think we've got things covered from my perspective as well. Eric, are you good here?
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to number 6 then.
Maybe tweak the language or something to address some of those broader issues that Councilmember Fleming has mentioned. And then number 6 is flexibility in REIT.
All right, so I'm going to jump in on this one, and I'll be consistent, because last year I also once again jumped in and I didn't support this. Council ended up supporting it, and as a member of the team, I supported it in my role as a council spokesperson, as I would with anything on our list. But from my own view, REIT, I think, is an important tool to exactly what Council Member Fleming was speaking to. REIT is there for new construction, new capacity, and we worked as a city family, through AWC and primarily, long and hard to get the REIT tool, and it's focused on real estate excise tax. So when there's a real estate transaction, that piece of that goes to infrastructure, future new infrastructure cost, building principally, it could be other things, and another more specific piece goes to development of parks. It doesn't go to maintenance, and it wasn't intended. That was changed, as was mentioned in the history of this, when we, during COVID times, to provide some money for maintenance, because that was near and dear at the time. And perhaps that can get extended, perhaps not. I'm more of a purist, thinking that it belongs because of the connection, the nexus, whatever term you want, between real estate transactions and growth demands to go for infrastructure. We use it to that purpose, and to date, we've primarily been using it to pay off bonds that paid for parks and paid for other things related to that. Now, we're paying off some of those bonds. We'll have more REIT to use in a different way. We'll have that REIT to use in a different way, I should say. It's also one of the challenges with REIT is it is unpredictable, erratic, driven by market. And so some years it's rich, other years not at all. Just depends how many real estate transactions. And so it's hard to put repeating dollar expenses into a REIT category. However, the argument is if we have flexibility, it's a good year, we can spread it around. And that's not a bad argument. I don't mean to underrate it, but just what I've heard is the other side of that. So that's me and my thoughts. So anybody else? Councilmember Lukoski.
Okay. Well, I was the one that supported this because I do like flexibility entwined in that, and it also gives the city the option to either do it for the capital improvements, the road pieces, or the flexibility to also bring it back in and to do the maintenance components to that. I like that as an organization, you can have that flex and flow and have that ability to choose so it's not so restrictive. So that's why I still like it.
Sure. All right. Fair enough. Other thoughts? Online? We're all good there? Okay. All right.
I'd like a little bit more whether or not this is
sounds like a
something I'm adding or not adding.
Okay, I'll jump in really quick. I support more flexibility in general. I think our council is generally wise enough to pick the most appropriate use of those funds. So I tend to align more with this, keeping this bullet in place.
All right.
And can I have some context? Mr. Chair, I apologize. Do I need to be recognized already?
Yes, and you're recognized, so please continue.
Okay, thank you. Can I have some context around our flexibility interpretation and how quickly we can move on what we might believe to be a great year for Reed as opposed to not so?
So right now, as Councilmember Worthington mentioned, where we can spend this money mainly is pavement maintenance. We can spend on, not pavement maintenance, we can do overlays and stuff like that. Or we can, build parks or build roads, basically. Those are the only things you can spend it on. I would say that it is paid for not just for growth, it's just paid for when a transaction happens. So the transaction happens, we build a playground. 10 years later, a transaction happens, we can build another playground, but we can't maintain the playground we already have. So it seemed to me that, and something we've argued before, is that if you want to tie it to, as they did in COVID, they didn't just say free for all, spend it however you like. It had to be tied to those, maintaining those infrastructure, those types of infrastructure that REIT could be used for. So to me, that seems like a fair compromise if we're just going back to a bill they've already passed and say, just extend this. No one objected. No city went bankrupt because they spent more than they had to. It seemed like that degree of flexibility is useful.
And that's the only scope of flexibility, quote unquote, that we're talking about at this point.
That's what we're talking about. At least that's what we've put previously in our legislative agenda. AWC may have a broader interpretation, but that's what we've done.
Okay, thank you. I thought we might have been talking about that expansion with the flexibility option, but now that I hear further context, I can appreciate and support the flexibility scenario with the wise counsel that I've observed thus far. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. Other thoughts before we move on? Or are you getting a sense of what you want to do or what we want to do?
That's through all 6. I'm ready to move on to the capital.
Capital it is.
So first we have Day Island Bridge design. I assume there's support for that unless I see heads going no. Okay. Traffic signal upgrade project. I don't know if, Jack, you want to kind of describe that. We've had that in our previous one.
I was curious about unit cost. I mean, a intersection cost. What is that like?
So it'll depend from intersection to intersection. The battery backup is about half of this cost. So think about it. It's 15 to 20,000 is what that element of it is. And then depending on the intersection, the other ones have varying costs depending on the situation. But so that's kind of the scope of things.
Yeah. And then if I may, I guess I've got the floor. So, and if I'm not, I'll recognize me. But anyhow, Jack, there's a portion of this cost associated with the ADA compliant controller. Is that really all about ADA?
For this part, it's the audible signals and pedestrian standards. So it's to be able to upgrade our so some of our newer signals already have this, and so that's where some of that varying costs are. But we have some of the older ones, or ones we haven't retrofitted, where it doesn't have the. It's particularly for sight visually impaired folks. Actually, anyway, that may not be the proper terminology anymore, but
we'll forgive you, but thank you for pointing that out.
To blind folks, that basically if it's that audible countdown and the beeping, so people know when it's safe to cross. Where that's the main thing that we're looking at for that element.
All right, and that's retrofitting. It sounds like. One of the reasons I ask is it seems like something that could qualify for a CDBG grant, where we haven't had one awarded in, I don't know, 15 years. Maybe it's only 10. But as a class, this qualifies. If it's about ADA, if that is what it's about, then we should be able to meet the CDBG qualification test. So.
I believe so. As long as it's benefiting the specific areas of the income qualifications, I think, but maybe not.
Not as a class. As a class, you don't have to do the income qualification.
Okay.
So, sorry.
No, that's good.
That's the distinction I'm trying to make, because we have a hard time in the income qualification.
Yeah.
But here we have a class, just like sidewalk cutouts for AD ramps. You can do that in Laurelhurst if that's where you need them.
Okay.
So even though they probably don't meet an income qualification.
That's good. We'll definitely want to explore that. I think that's a great idea.
So, okay. Aside from that, but we can get back to the traffic signal backups, and the intent here is during power outages, signals can operate at least for some time. So, what do folks think?
Totally agree with you.
Okay. Okay.
Got a thumbs up on that one. Next.
Okay, I see a thumb up and a nodding interest, so we're good there. All right.
All right. Next we have Alameda street lighting.
Street lighting. All right. And that's about $1 million.
And this is the portion of Alameda. It's Councilmember Fleming had brought up that it's a quite dark stretch between Cirque Drive and basically where a new segment of road we built. One thing that is also pertinent to this is typically we do have a standard for lighting our arterial streets, and since that segment became an arterial street with when we connected it through, it really is a gap in our lighting system, let's say, for arterial streets. So, but that's what this pertains. We don't have limits, the project limits, so I did want to clarify that.
Yeah, good, thank you. What do we think about street lighting in Alameda? Thank you, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you. Since I have brought this up originally, it's really a safety issue for pedestrians coming through there, as well as deer. Thank you. Now you can hear me. In that section that Jack talks about at night, especially now that we're into the hours of darkness, you can barely see, even with good headlights coming through that area. There's been nights when pedestrians are walking through there, you just don't see them until you're on top of them. And deer, you definitely don't see them until you literally start to clip them. So, I look at it not so much as from aesthetics, but I look at it as a safety thing for us to think about.
Other thoughts? Good, thank you.
And bringing it up to the standards that we have for our trails.
I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Wood.
Thank you, Councilman. If this is the section of Alameda I'm thinking of, don't we also desperately need a sidewalk on the UP side of that street as well, if we're talking about safety improvements? Because right now, if we're talking that new stretch that goes from Cirque north, are we talking Cirque south?
No, we're talking about the new road that we punched through from 67th to Cirque. Okay. There is a section of road that's not completed with street lighting.
Yeah, so it's Cirque south-ish because it kind of veers, but yeah, it's the other direction. It's the in front of the Martha's Vineyard neighborhood type of area. I mean, they're not the only ones that serve that, but that's the vicinity.
Okay, got it. Well, so in general, I do support the lighting there, but if we're talking Alameda, Cirque north, there's that whole side of the street where there's not even a shoulder to walk on, much less a sidewalk. And if we could, I don't know if that should be appropriate to include in this or if we want to include it later on, but I do think that's an area we need to address.
Jack, is that in your projected sidewalk program?
It's in the 6-year TIP. It's just a nature of finding where we can find funds for it.
We could merge it.
What's that?
Street. numbers.
All right.
We could try, it depends on, I guess we could, it doesn't hurt to add that to a request and then look at what, we can talk to our legislators of what's options. Sometimes they're looking for a bigger thing and sometimes they want to be more focused on different elements. So I don't think it hurts to add that and make it in our things we're at least going to be targeting, whether or not we can this session or not. We do rely quite heavily on input from our legislators.
Thank you. Other comments on this one? If not, let's move on to the next.
Mr. Chair, I do have a comment. I just wanted to make sure that the main thing is the main thing. The safety issue is a great call out. The expectation about the lighting being poor is real. The underscoring of that is only that much more illuminated, no pun intended, as it's gotten darker. And the expectation about how the speed of the vehicles have continued to elevate good, bad, or indifferent. And so I don't want it to be minimized about what the real concern is about the lighting. It's great to put a full comprehensive way to talk about safety in ways in which the sidewalks as well as the additional improvements that would be consistent with who we have been as a city to be part of an approach. But it is really clear to me that the illumination in that area is extremely vital. So thanks again for its consideration. I think it should be prioritized. And if we can get an overall comprehensive approach, great. But in terms of priority, the lighting is number one.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to just add, just from expectations to typically for state requests, unless something changes, but in the past, they kind of like us to target the $1 million or less type of projects. So I think it's good to have it on the radar, and maybe better to have it as two separate things, or we target it for another year or two. But it just scope, unless something changes, they're not looking for the $5 million project usually in this type of request.
We always get feedback on, even though you approve this list, and we'll say this is what we want. If we get feedback that something else, there's an opportunity, we pivot and we'll go down that road too. So
having that flexibility,
right.
Put it on.
Just want to make it clear that these are our emphasis, but the sessions are wild. So you can't always predict.
All right.
Wild. Let me write down the sessions are wild. Okay.
Ready for the next one?
Yes. Day Island Spit Road, Federal.
So Federal, and we have the Day Island Spit Road, and I guess I have a threshold question here. Seawall, or have we looked at this enough to know the seawall is an answer, or is it more of a maybe answer?
Probably a maybe answer.
Okay.
It's still a bit, some of this has to be a full design and what we're doing there, and it could be, it may be an element of, instead of formally rebuilding the entire seawall, maybe we're just adding some curbing, like it's kind of out in front of Councilmember McCluskey's house. That's something similar. If you had a more comprehensive, taller barrier there, that could take care of a lot of the issues where you have the wind and the king tide combination that blocks a lot of it. So that could be it. So it is a little nebulous and also a little bit based on what the programs also could be.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, did you have some thoughts about that?
Yes, I have. I live on Day Island, South Spit, full disclosure, and I had, for a few thousands of dollars, raised the seawall in front, and with last winter, it did help. My neighbors to the south weren't so lucky because they chose not to use the contractor to enhance their wall. They, for whatever financial reasons that they had, they all would have liked to do it, but they chose not to. But when the water comes over, the elevation gain that we have put in place did prevent the water from overflowing. But the issue is that if the rest of the South Spitters don't do it, then the water collects and flows around and creates more of a flooding on the south end, which pushes it up towards the to where the stop sign is, and where that big dip goes, and then it collects in the big dip. And then there's a house that pumps extra water into it, and so you have, it's not a pond, it turns into a lake in that particular area. So retrofitting the road in that area and also the undermining that is occurring, I think would be essential for the South Spitters. If our council chooses that that's one of its priority for a federal ask.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on this one? I have one in a moment, but anybody here? And if not, anybody? Mayor Pro Tem Wood.
Sure. I support this idea, and I think this is going to be something we're going to be looking at continuously as a city over the next 30 to 50 years. With climate change and sea level rise, this problem will only get worse. I view this $1.5 million as buying us time to look at even longer term solutions. I think this is a good idea to help us address that issue for the short term. Thank you.
Thank you. My comment is, what about Sunset Beach? They also experienced at the same time some issues. The problems are specific to those areas, and I'm not saying that a seawall is going to help them and all, but it's more like being a little more inclusive about finding solutions, I guess, is what I'm trying to think about. So they may have maybe it's, who knows what, I can make something up, but I don't know, what the details would be. I leave that for folks to know what they're doing. But I would be somewhat inclined to see about including Sunset Beach. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you make a great point. And again, since we're having the conversation this evening on health, safety, well-being of our citizens, that's what this is all about. Maybe we should take the time to really do a more comprehensive look along our shoreline and see what properties along that shoreline are at risk for any kind of adversity, whether it's a king tide or whatever, and then maybe use this as a jumping off point for starting, but then looking at Sunset Beach, and maybe there's other properties that need to be identified on how we protect those as we move into the future of the city.
Okay. Eric, did you want more?
I want kind of two routes I heard here. We have one, this should be a project, and then another is, should we look at this more comprehensively before we do an ask? So
start and then follow on.
I guess my recommendation is almost similar to what we talked about before, because there's, especially it's even 20-fold federal programs. There could be things that pop up all the time, right? And it may be appropriate. They're looking for just a specific, pardon the pun, concrete project, right? Something that's tangible. Or a lot of times they are looking for those systematic plans. And so, I think it's beneficial to have both of those things on there. And then, Lisa, she can work and look and see what programs we have out there and which ones maybe a citywide plan is going to fit a program to target. So I think it's beneficial to have those as two separate items. And they could be combined in one if there happen to be one that does it both. But
okay. Well, with just one federal ask, it seems like there's room for a little bit more. So, okay.
Yeah. So you got my thumbs up.
Yeah.
All righty.
Yeah.
And I do want to emphasize that this project was not brought to us by Councilmember McCluskey. This was brought to us by, so we're not favoring any council members in case people at home happen to see this.
I have a detailed question on specific to this, the spit, I should say, and raising the seawall. Is that in water work?
Not for $1.5 million.
Yeah, okay.
So it'd most likely be a combination of like a retrofit type of thing, and then maybe some nominal increase of the road surface as well, although there's a limit because the houses and the driveways are super close to the roads. There's not a lot of, you don't, at least for a lot of them, you don't have a lot of room to raise up the road to, or else you won't be able to get in and out of your house. So those are still the minor details we have to make sure.
Dynamics to the design, but not intended at this point to be in-water.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
I would envision that if we had to get into in-water, we're talking 3 times the amount or maybe more.
That's what was in my mind. So, okay, good. All right, that brings us to council member suggestions. Would anyone like to talk about Mayor Figueroa's two thoughts, if we can get a brief description of those? Does that make sense?
I don't have a description of the first one, but I can say related to sewer is that I have an inquiry already in asking about potential sewer funding. If sewer funding becomes available, we'll definitely be pursuing that.
Okay.
Right now, I just don't know. So.
And the good news with sewer funding, we have done the study of prioritization, so we do have areas that we looked at the ones that were the top ones. We could then have which is the next one to target kind of thing. Depending on how our bids turn out next week, we'll also know which ones are getting done. So a lot of work of prioritization has already been done, so that is good.
All right. Then shall I invite Mayor Pro Tem Wood to talk about his item?
Sure.
Sure. This was me just trying to brainstorm options to not do things like, say, increase the 1% tax cap that we were talking about earlier. Because right now, all of our funds for the city that are in our accounts basically go to the one fund that Washington State authorizes, which pays anywhere from just over 0% to I think it's right now probably around 4% return. But whatever it is, that return never exceeds and is usually far less than inflation, which means that we are continually on a path to running out of money in our various funds over time because it just doesn't increase. And rather than going to our citizens every 10 years saying, hey, we need to increase your taxes to support this, your police or your roads, if we had the option, again, probably through another state managed fund, but one that assumed a little more risk, to put, say, 10% of our reserve into a slightly higher risk but higher return fund, we could probably mitigate some of the long-term loss we have right now just by putting our money in an investment that doesn't even return inflation typically. That's my thought process. I don't have specifics of what that would look like, but I was just think it's something that we should be looking at as a state.
Okay, thank you. So I think that illustrates things pretty well. I know there's some history about various risk levels and public funding, public investment, I should say. And some of that is a negative history that probably pushes this issue. And I think we have some constraints which would take legislative change, which is, I guess, what this discussion is about. So, any case, is there anyone want to have some further discussion on this or education or whatever that might be? Councilmember Lukowski.
Probably a little more education, because when you put public funds at risk in a risk investment, I'm concerned with the loss of that and how that would impact the city. Like what portion would we put at risk, especially when we have dwindling funding accounts, and how that impacted long term and Mr. Faison's long term forecasting plan. So before I support that, I would like to see what that looks like. And some of the historical histories, as you had mentioned, about the risk, it's not risk-free, obviously.
Yep.
And so I don't really have an appetite to risk money that doesn't belong to me and then have it not return an investment that to my expectations or what the city needs currently or in the future.
Okay. So a chance to learn a little bit more about that may be helpful for us as a council. Does that sound fair enough, Councilmember Wood?
I freely recognize this idea is not fully developed, but I think it needs to be looked at, because if the other way to look at risk is for $100 that we put in the state fund right now, and say 2 years ago was returning just above 0%, but inflation was at 3% or more, we are risking our funds by putting $100 in and getting 97 back a year later. And if we wait 2 years on those funds, we're getting even less back. And the idea is to try and just mitigate some of that inflationary loss that we are taking, because it's not like we put 100 in and we get 100 back as far as spending power. That's what I'm trying to look at. I'd be happy to not prioritize this for this year because it does need more thought. But and I understand absolutely your concern. I do not want to gamble public funds in any way, shape, or form. But I do think there might be better ways for us to try and mitigate some of that inflationary loss in spending power. And that's where I'm trying to go with this.
Yeah, we appreciate the recognition of the inflation issue for us, and it's understanding of what our constraints are, and if we want to make a change, where we need to make that change at within the legislative process. So, okay. Seems like some education for all of us, and including myself then, and then we can figure out how to target that if we want to move forward. Anything else before we move on to Councilmember Rossi? Councilmember Rossi.
Thank you, Councilmember. This idea really came out of an extension of, thank you, Eric, for your patience with me, House Bill 2468 from last session, which was citing of child care facilities, permits child care facilities before and after school cares to exist in open in existing elementary and school zones without having to go through the hearing examiner conditional use permit process. This was an idea that originally I heard about before the session, South Sound Military Community. And as you know, we're in a child care crisis, not enough child care. The number one need that military spouses in this community say that is their number one need is childcare. All of the child cares are full on base. Many of these child cares facilities that want to open do take military subsidy at 100% called Child Care Aware. So if there were more openings for them, we could really help these military spouses. Women's number one need, working women in our community in the Pierce County area, child care, lack of child care. Before and after care facilities, number one need for working women in our county. Latchkeys are full before and after school care programs. So when I first heard about this bill that didn't go quite far enough, Lakewood, our neighbors, they went ahead and initiated their own version of this. I mentioned it to Kevin, but for site knowledge, I'm going to forward it to both of you, but for 2468, and again, we know that the conditional use permit process and hearing examiner is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. That prohibits childcare from really opening. If we can be part of the solution and providing more options for families, for a military community, without having so much red tape, I think it's worth looking into.
Mm-hmm. So, are we talking about removing land use barriers at the state level?
No, it's more than, yes, correction. It's more than just for the military. I'm saying the idea of this, when I first heard about it personally, when I heard about the number one need was childcare, and then moving on, and then found out about House Bill 2468, it was intriguing to me as a city, again, to take some of the barriers off if we want to be a part of the solution, offering programs for youth. This is childcare, infant to before pre-K, and then also school age before and after care, permitting them to be in existing school zones.
Okay, and so my question is this at removing barriers at the state level or at the local. City of University Place level?
Yes.
But we'll be working at it at the state legislature?
Correct.
Or is that something we do with the authority we have as a council?
I think it's both options. I think this is why I brought it forward in this legislative agenda as we were talking, because it did come forward as a state idea. However, we have other jurisdictions that have led by example of doing it locally without the state level. So there you go.
Okay, Council?
I have a question.
Councilmember McCluskey. Yes, after Councilmember McCluskey. So.
Sure, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm intrigued, and I'm thinking at the local level, maybe looking at some of our conditional use permitting pieces there, and also encouraging in the state to mitigate some of their barriers to opening and developing some of the child care centers. And I, too, have that in mind to enhance and help expand child care and after-school care options, because there are a lot of requirements and conditions that operators have to go through, and it's really hard to navigate it, to make that more seamless process easier to access, with the end goal of helping assist viable child care facilities to open their doors in unique settings and not create barriers to that.
Is it fair to, for both of the separate proponents here, can we link these two and call them one? Okay, good enough. They're now one. All right.
I will reshape the language to be broader. And I think having been a bill makes it easier to go back and find the history, who was the sponsor, and
I'll forward it to you.
And then we can look locally.
It was a state preemption.
Okay. Usually we don't advocate for state preemption, but in this case.
And I know Councilmember Wood had something he wanted to add. Please.
Just briefly, just speaking from my perspective from JBLM, one of the big issues with the child care centers is staffing and training. Just the time it takes, and they have a relatively high turnover. It's a very tough job that's probably not as well paid as it could be. Did that bill 2468 address any of those issues, or is it just strictly looking at land use?
Land use only, yeah. Yep. During COVID, there were a lot of, processes that the state allowed for that very need for child care workers. But I agree, that it's in dire need of, and you're correct, training in it is a high turnover role as well.
So should we be considering advocating for some supports for staffing and training along with land use, or is that getting too broad, too big?
In my opinion, I'm just speaking because I put it on the list. It feels like a little bit in the weeds for us, but that's my opinion.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Other thoughts on this one, on child care? Okay. Councilmember McCluskey.
I'm going to jump in here.
And followed by Councilmember Boykin when you get done.
Oh, okay. I think that would be separate from the training and the retention of the staff and the encouragement for recruitment. I think that's also a huge issue, because you have the facility, and if you can't staff it, that's not good. So I don't know what the state could help us with that, but if they could, I would do that as a part B to this.
Councilmember Boykin.
Now you got me.
I was just simply going to ask about that other municipality that has stepped forward to be part of the solution. If there is any information that we have about how they are addressing it, if it is just from the land use standpoint, or if it is more comprehensive, good, bad, and different, and then the expectation about this being a solution for more than just City of University Place, more than just JBLM families and communities. It is really a wonderful way forward, and I just like that the intentionality is here. So I just want to applaud the idea of being elevated, because it certainly is not going away. It exacerbates difficulties and challenges in economic development in a nuanced way that is inextricably linked, and I believe that we're going to discover that more and more. So I'm just hopeful that we do find ourselves looking more intensively about what we might be able to do differently in this space.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm typically not a great fan of government always getting in the way of progress. And when I've had conversations with former and current daycare operators, in the past there was this cry that we needed more staff training and availability of staff. You give that to the legislature, and if there's a way to screw it up, they will do it. As a former legislator, I can say that. When we start creating more onerous rules and regulations, that then becomes a barrier, and why we've lost so many daycare and why we can't attract daycare workers is because we just keep piling more rules and regulations and requirements to the point where people just say, hey, it's not worth the time or effort. So I would not be a huge fan of putting that on the agenda for anything. I think we've got enough regulatory requirements on those facilities, and we should be looking at ways to remove barriers, not add barriers.
All right, thank you. So, Council, I want to point out that we're about 16 minutes to the top of the hour, which is when we're scheduled to have it to adjourn, which would be 10 o'clock. Long meeting for us, but a productive one, certainly. So I want to point that out. We still have 8 or so council-related requests to review. I think Eric may have direction on this one, and I'd encourage us to step to the next one, if that's all right. Okay, let's do that. And Councilmember Grassi, you have the floor.
Oh, and I can yield that one. I think we covered that really in our earlier discussion, so thank you.
Then that brings us to Councilmember McCluskey and going through your list.
All right. So the first one on my list is expanding funding options related to a variety of housing types, dovetailing with SHAPE on that.
So, I'm sorry, so relating that to SHAPE, you said?
Well, relating it to one of SHAPE's legislative priorities.
Okay.
So that's and interested into also in what the state can do to incorporate more funding into University Place to encourage different housing types.
And SHAPE has a legislative agenda, if I remember right.
Yes, they do.
They do. Yeah. So it's linking up with that agenda, or this is specific to housing types and funding?
It is University Place specific, but it also aligns with SHAPE for the county.
All right. This just clarifying things, I believe. Comments about that? In terms of housing types, funding for a variety of housing types specific to UP?
Middle housing, those cottage, you know.
Yeah.
ADUs, what have you.
ADUs. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
So I think I would need some more clarification on this one. I have looked, I haven't gotten SHAPE's 2025 legislative agenda yet. The manager there hasn't sent it out yet. So if they have adopted one, then I haven't seen it. This is obviously consistent with their mission and consistent with
Eric,
what
if you could move the mic a little closer to you.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I said that I have not seen SHAPE's 2025 legislative agenda. I don't know if they've adopted one yet. Yes, but this is consistent with their agenda. I might suggest that we can simply, since we are a member, we can, it doesn't necessarily have to be on our legislative agenda. We could just simply reference it, once we see what it is. Because this is pretty broad, and there are a few housing-related issues that I think the council as a whole would be opposed to. And you might note that we have not included anything housing-related in our initial assessment of what should go forward. And that's in part due to there are some concerns among cities about whether or not we want to open up the housing issue again. It could get worse, not better. And
that's
so,
true.
I think we might want to just my suggestion would be that we might want to rely on SHAPE and support them in their efforts when they get their agenda.
Okay, I would concur with that because I know what happened the last time. It was painful.
All right.
Yes. All right, so you can cross that one off. And just align it, we don't need, SHAPE will take care of it, and then they have a lobbyist, and then the director.
Behavioral health?
Yes. Yes, number 3 covers it in the front end, and it aligns with youth and juveniles, so. Support the construction industry workforce development and training efforts. this also aligns with SHAPE's legislative priorities that they passed? Yeah, I know you haven't seen it, but they...
Yeah, I don't remember construction being
Yes,
in
sir.
the last one. Was it in the last one? Okay. So
So if we want to cross that one off because it's in SHAPE.
I leave that to the group, yeah.
I'm
Comments
just
on this?
looking.
Anyone online as well? In terms of our council members? Frank, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I'm fine with Councilmember McCluskey's rationale and how she might want to see that moved to align with SHAPE and let SHAPE handle that as well, removing it from our list, or her list, if you will.
All right. And the other one also is probably AWCs with, the unfunded mandates that developed through the Growth Management Act.
Okay.
So I want to concur and support that because, we're left wholly holding the bag on that. So whether we want to reinforce it on the city level or not, it's up to you all on that one.
Yeah. Right, and we've got AWC on that in terms of, so certainly I support being aligned.
Cross that one off, all right. The next one I have is support and expand access to state grant funds for local governments following emergency events, and that is, I believe, University Place specific, because when we had a couple other emergency events, the flood that happened a few years ago and also the ice storm, trying to get the emergency grants in a timely manner was cumbersome, and to understand the process and to support additional services, but also the accessibility to that. There's inherently barriers, for income levels and other barriers and requirements that could be eliminated so that the people that need at that time could get some of their immediate needs met, and they can start piecing their lives back together.
Okay. So I know in the case of the King Tide events, some of our residents came close to qualifying but didn't quite make it because there were some technical aspects to it. And it's unusual, actually, to have state grants. There was a state grant that they almost made it but didn't quite. Right. And I don't know if there's some reform there that could be possible specific to that. I think it was my recollection is it was a demonstration grant project to see if there were things falling through the cracks. And, well, we had one, but it didn't get caught by their effort. So expanding such programs, is that what I'm hearing? Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. I support that myself. Any other thoughts on that or others before we get to, we've already done child care, and then you have one more.
I do. Okay. One more.
So was there interest by everyone in that one? Okay,
I'm looking. Okay, yeah, we're looking. All right, and I've got a thumbs up from the Mayor Pro Tem as well. Well, I once called a council, at least once called, and from Councilmember Boykin as well. Okay. Great. Senior transportation.
All right. Lastly, support and expand senior transportation options, or to make it easier and accessible for our seniors to not only take the transportation to medical or to community centers, but also for their mental health and social integration, is to also have transportation set up so they can keep their social connections in place. Like I know there was one city up in Canada. It's like an Uber drive that they have just for seniors. So, it's a small car that they can go to the senior's home or facility, wherever that senior is, and transport them to wherever they want to make that connection. And sometimes it's a nominal fee, and other times the seniors can qualify for free service back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like this idea because it really supports the goal of allowing seniors to age in place.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and for that reason, I think this is a great idea.
So, and if I may, and I like the idea as well. I get concerned about the prospect of this turning from a state request to a local program from UP. And that's something we have stepped away from because of a variety of reasons. I don't want to just accidentally get back in the business without a thoughtful discussion about what that means to us. But beyond that,
I hear your concern. Yes.
Yep, okay.
I wouldn't want to be in the transportation business. We have Pierce Transit.
Yeah, there we are. There's other options.
Right.
Okay, good enough. Great. Anything else, Councilmember McCluskey?
Nope, that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, there's one remaining. Oh, it's mine. Let me see if I can do this quickly. As you know, I serve on the opioid abatement task force. In our recent meeting, there was some discussion from some of the membership, principally the chair, council member from Lakewood, was discussing their legislative agenda, and more specifically that if you project, while the settlement dollars are not, and they're not settled all the way through, but you make a reasonable projection of what the settlement dollars will lead to. These are from, of course, the pharmaceutical manufacturers and perhaps related businesses. I don't really know those details, but that are settling and providing funds to various states, including the state of Washington, and it's money that we get a small sliver, fractional piece of. It's not about our funds. It's about the state's funds. So Senator Proxmire once said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, it's real money. Now you're talking real money or something of that effect.
Pretty soon you're talking.
The state share, some would estimate it to be over $1 billion. When you have $1 billion on the table, it attracts a lot of attention. And Lakewood's point was, with that kind of money in play, there's a tendency for perhaps there's a tendency for certain state agencies to try and find a sliver, a piece, a chunk, a gob, whatever, of the settlement funds to find a way to justify their budget. The suggestion here is just the state have a transparent process that hopefully, in my world at least, would prioritize treatment or transition out of treatment as opposed to a secondary agency that might not have that much direct lives on people recovering from opioid addiction. And so I would like to suggest that we track or follow, and if there's the opportunity that we think is warranted, make comment about such things during this legislative session. So,
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
okay, thank you. All right, Mayor Pro Tem, okay, and Councilmember Boykin, we're just about it. We're going to do this before 10 o'clock and actually get through the whole agenda if we're not careful. But in any case, anybody have any further comments online?
Sensible makes sense. Sensible makes sense, and it should have already been anticipated in my view. But good on us for making sure that there's alignment. What you don't make sense.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, very good. Well, Council, I think, by golly, we've got through the agenda. We did it on time, and I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me participate in it and hold the gavel. And so that was neat. Mayor Pro Tem, hey, it's next time it's yours. But thank you for. I hope you're feeling better, and we're going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, guys. Bye.
Okay.
Nicely done.